drink anything. Oh.
Mr. Mayor, we're now live.
Good evening, everyone. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of Ajax Council is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and senior town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I'll now call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island and the Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the William Treaties First Nations. This place is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples. Let us move forward together with kindness and respect. Does any member of council have any disclosure of pecuniary interest?
No.
Being none, just let me get my screen up here. There we go. Adoption of the minutes. We have moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Regional Councillor Lee, that the minutes of the meeting of council held on April 20th, 2020 be adopted. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Being none, those in favor? Actually, I'm just going to say any opposed. And your silence will be a lot easier than trying to count hands. We've had no members of the public submit any questions for question period. So moving on to presentations, we have item 5.1, official plan amendment application OPA 19-A1, zoning bylaw amendment application Z1/19. Jean L. Garden Plaza, 593 Taunton Road East, and Mr. Simpson, I believe.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor and members of council, as well as those members from the public who are joining us virtually today. My name is Eric Simpson, planner for the town of Ajax. I will be providing you with an overview of official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications that are before you, submitted by Jean L. Gardens Plaza to facilitate a residential development proposal on lands located at the southwest corner of Taunton Road East and Audley Road North, municipally known as 593 Taunton Road East. The subject lands outlined in red in this image are located within the northeast corner of the town's urban area and are 0.77 hectares in area. The subject lands consist of two separate parcels of land. One occupied parcel, which is known as 593 Taunton Road East, which includes an existing residential dwelling, detached garage, and workshop, all of which are to be removed, and one vacant parcel without a municipal address. To the north of Taunton Road East are large rural residential lots. Further north is the Deer Creek Golf Club. East of Audley Road North is the Audley Recreation Center, and lands north and east of the subject lands are within the boundaries of the Greenbelt Plan. To the south and west are residential lands consisting of single detached dwellings and semi-detached dwellings within the Hamlet neighborhood. The purpose of the staff report is to provide background information on the submitted development applications, provide an evaluation of the development proposal, and to recommend approval of OPA 19A1 and zoning bylaw amendment application Z1/19. In addition, this report also informs council of the future development applications, more specifically site plan and draft plan of condominium applications, which will be required to be submitted and approved prior to the subject lands being developed. The majority of the subject lands are designated medium density residential within the town of Ajax official plan. The southern portion of the subject lands are designated as low density residential, and a small portion of town owned lands, which are to be transferred to the applicant / future developer, are designated as open space. The subject lands are also located within area specific policy 6.2 of the official plan and are located at the intersection of two arterial roads. Taunton Road East is also identified as a regional corridor in the town and regional official plan. In order to permit the development proposal, the applicant is requesting that the official plan be amended to redesignate a portion of the subject lands from low density residential and open space to medium density residential, and establish an area-specific exemption for the subject lands to permit block townhouse dwellings, back-to-back stacked townhouse dwellings, and a maximum density of 124 units per net hectare. The majority of the subject lands are zoned permanent countryside, PC zone, while the southern portion is zoned as residential 1E, R1E zone, and open space zone, both of which are subject to exception 80 within the town of Ajax zoning bylaw. In order to permit the development proposal, the applicant is requesting that the zoning bylaw be amended to 1. Rezone the subject lands to a residential multiple 6, RM6 zone with a site-specific exemption, permit a maximum of 96 dwelling units, and establish development standards that would implement the proposed development. Development standards relate to matters such as maximum building height, minimum building setbacks, and minimum parking requirements. And lastly, to place a holding provision on the subject lands. The conditions to remove the holding provision from the subject lands will require that the applicant or future developer enter into a development agreement, i.e. a site plan agreement with the town, construct a sidewalk extension along Audley Road North and a multi-use trail extension along Tawn Road East, and complete the necessary steps for filing a record of site condition for the subject lands. The development standards in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment were established based on the following development concept plan. The development proposal consists of 88 back-to-back stacked townhouse dwellings and 8 block townhouse dwellings. The proposed 96 townhouse dwellings will be realized through 6 development blocks and are to be 3 stories in height. The proposed development will include a private condominium roadway, access from Audley Road North, and 1 level of underground parking to accommodate residential and visitor parking. Block 1, shown on the far left, consists of 8 block townhouse dwellings, which will include rear yards and front yards. Each townhouse dwelling will have a garage and a driveway. Blocks 2 and 3, shown at the top, and Block 4, shown on the far right, will each consist of 16 back-to-back stacked townhouse dwellings, while Blocks 5 and 6, which are at the bottom, will each consist of 20 back-to-back stacked townhouse dwellings. All of these blocks will front onto public roads and the private condominium roadway. There will be no access to or from Boyd Crescent to the proposed development. An emergency secondary access will be provided, however, and P-gates will be installed to prevent any vehicular access. Various open green spaces will be provided to accommodate the proposed development, including an outdoor amenity space at the southwest corner of the subject lands, as well as private amenity areas in the form of rear yards for Block 1 and balconies and rooftop terraces for Blocks 2 to 6. The proposed setbacks in the zoning bylaw amendment provide an appropriate buffer and ensure that the proposed development blocks will be set below a 45-degree angular plane measured from the adjacent low-density residential area. The proposed development will incorporate building and landscaping features to enhance the public streetscape, and through the use of setbacks and landscaping, not infringe on the privacy and sunlight of adjacent properties. The proposed development represents a type of built form suitable for infill intensification along a corridor, as well as a type of built form that is compatible with the existing character of the surrounding neighborhood. The 3-story townhouse dwellings provide a gradual change in height, building massing, and scale from the surrounding neighborhood. Conceptual elevation has been submitted in support of the development proposal. Detailed review of the proposed architectural design of the development will take place during the site plan approval process. All architectural drawings will be subject to the review and approval of the town's control architect. All townhouse blocks will be designed to include well-articulated facades and a variety of exterior building materials and colors. The subject lands include a portion of lands currently owned by the town. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant/future developer will need to acquire a portion of town-owned lands. These lands are part of a landscape block that abuts the Audley Road right-of-way. These lands are considered remnant, and the acquisition of such will enable a better site design for the development proposal. The purchase and sale of these lands will be addressed through the site plan approval process. The development applications were reviewed against the applicable provincial, regional, and town land use planning policy, and it was determined that the proposed development is consistent with the policies of the PPS and the growth plan, and conforms with the policies of the regional official plan and town official plan. The above referenced reports, studies, and materials were submitted in support of the development proposal. All materials were reviewed, and the recommendations contained in such are supported. The recommendations will be included within the future site plan agreement, which will be registered on title. Details of the submitted report studies are outlined in the report. However, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on such matters.
Okay. Questions to Mr. Simpson on the development?
Oh, I'm not done, sorry.
Okay.
Concerns relating to the amount of traffic and parking that would overflow onto the adjacent local streets as a result of the proposed development were raised by the public. A transportation impact study was submitted in support of the development proposal, which concludes that the anticipated vehicle trips generated from the development are not expected to have a negative impact on the existing road network. The single vehicular access point for the proposed development will also ensure that future traffic from the development does not lead to an influx of vehicles on the adjacent local roads. In addition, the proposed parking supply, which includes 106 residential and 25 visitor parking spaces, which was informed by a proxy parking survey, is considered appropriate to service the development and prevent an influx of on-street parking. Concerns relating to the potential noise generated from the proposed development and adverse impacts that it would have on the surrounding area were also raised. Noise and vibration assessments were submitted, which examine the impacts of the proposed development on the surrounding area and impacts relating to construction. It is expected that the development would have a negligible effect on the neighboring properties with respect to noise impacts, as traffic related to the proposed development will be small relative to the existing traffic volumes that already exist within the area. Different vibration monitoring and mitigation requirements for the construction of the proposed development were also identified, which will be required to be implemented. Lastly, concerns related to the proposed built form and density of the development proposal with specific regard to provincial privacy issues were also raised. Through the land use compatibility section of the report in the previous slide, justification has been provided to address how the type and scale of development proposed is appropriate and will not have an adverse impact on the privacy of the surrounding area. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed development makes efficient use of underutilized land within the town and provides for housing intensification and diversification to help contribute towards the town and regional goals of providing a mix of housing types, sizes, and tenure to serve residents of various household sizes, incomes, and ages. The proposed development balances the goals and objectives of the medium density residential designation and infill development along corridors, while respecting the context of the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed development provides for a compact built form designed in favor of the pedestrian and that is transit supportive. The proposed development achieves the planning direction framework as set out by the province, the region, and the town. Based on the foregoing, the following recommendations have been provided for your consideration. That concludes my presentation. The applicant and agent of the development applications are present in this electronic meeting should you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Questions from council to staff. We have Regional Councillor Leeds first.
Through the chair to the chair, should we be moving the report up first or should we be doing the questions first, just as a point of order?
Do your questions to staff first, then I'll move the report up.
Thank you. The decision to change from low density residential to medium density, I understand there's targets and whatnot, but when was that decision made and how were the residents involved with that decision?
Sorry, say that again.
So this was we're trying to change this from low density residential to medium density, correct?
Well, the majority of the lands already are medium. There's
But
a small portion in the south that is low density.
Right. And so we had 2 open houses, correct?
We had an open house, and now this is also serving as the public meeting.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the residents understand they did have a chance to bring up their concerns. I know in our agenda we got a lot of emails and correspondence regarding this, but so here are a few of my questions. So the main entrance off Audley, when one is exiting, is it a right turn only, or can they also turn left?
No, it would be a full movement, so they can turn right or turn left.
With our traffic study, there's no concern of, because if I'm not mistaken, that entrance is pretty much almost at the intersection of Taunton and Audley. So we're not worried about congestion or...
Yeah, so one of our comments originally was how this would affect the queuing lane to turn left onto Taunton if you're lining up at Audley.
Right.
And the TIS, or the Transportation Impact Study, actually did a queuing analysis which looked at based on the existing, current, and future traffic for that network. If there were to be vehicles queuing up for that turn, that there'd still be full access for this site to be turned out of or turned into. There was no issues.
And if I can get the clerk to go back to the picture of the layout of the buildings and the roads, please. Keep going. This one. So once I turn in to the sorry, can you go one picture down? The other one, this one, yes. So once I turn into the development, and we can see it's 2 lanes on each side. But if I were to get to the end of a development, and for example, there was no parking, and I had to turn around, how would I turn around? It doesn't seem to make a complete loop because, as you said, it does not connect to Boyd Crescent. So ultimately, I'd be asked to make a 3-point turn. Correct?
Correct. That is correct. And we don't want it to connect to Boyd Crescent because then that will result with further traffic going onto a local road.
And we think there's enough room to make that 3-point turn if there's a car in the parking lot of that house and visitor parking would be full. There's no
Yes, there
danger, I
should
guess, is
be.
my question.
Yes, there should be adequate space to make that maneuver.
And if I may, through the chair, jump in there and further elaborate. As we go through the site plan approval process, details such as what happens at the terminus of these little dead ends, those types of details would be ironed out through the site plan approval process. There might be like a little hammerhead or a little indentation that'll make that 3-point turn maneuver a little more, I guess, easier as opposed to having to compete with a full visitor parking area, etc. So that's what this site plan doesn't show those details, but that would be through the future site plan application where those details would be worked out.
But ultimately, through the chair to the acting director of planning, once we make the decision here, then even if the developer didn't fix it or make the changes, then that's just the way it is, no?
No, because right now all we're establishing is the land use, which is the medium or the low to medium change, as Eric has expressed. The property is predominantly medium density already. It's just bringing that small piece at the south end, tying that into the medium density, and the zoning's established through this process.
Okay.
The principle of the design of the site is also established through the zoning, because the zoning is going to put everything in their front yard setbacks, setbacks from the private road, heights of the buildings, all those parameters will be put in place through the zoning. But the little details with regards to the turnarounds at the little dead ends, how the garbage is going to be picked up, where the garbage is going to be, how people, the types of landscaping that's going to occur at the various, within the development or along the roads or within the square at the corner of Tawn and Audley, all those details will be further hashed out, and the developer won't, whatever is done today does not dictate how we complete the site plan process when it comes to those finite details.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Through the chair, to my next question is, if I'm not mistaken, I read in the report that ultimately the development in question is in a sense short 37 spaces, and planning ultimately decided that was an acceptable resolution. Why would we be okay with shorting 37 parking spaces?
So yes, a TIS was completed, and as part of that, there was a proxy parking survey, which is basically a survey that looks at an existing development within the town that's of a similar scale to see what are, I guess, appropriate parking rates for that, and then they apply it towards this. So with that being said, yeah, there's a 37 deficit space. However, the specific visitor parking spaces that are proposed comply with the zoning bylaw requirements. And the parking requirements for the one block, that's the block townhouses, which are the more traditional townhouses, that also complies. It actually exceeds it. The specific shortage is related to the stacked back-to-back townhouses. the proposed amount that they're providing, 131, we've reviewed it. We think it's reasonable. We have to consider that with the overarching land use planning policy that prevails today, intensification, transit supported development, reducing auto dependency, all these are primary goals. And with that being said, in considering the current housing market, you get more and more of these proposals becoming prevalent. We've also approved similar parking rates and supplies for other developments within the town. And like I said before, that this type of proposal is becoming more and more prevalent throughout the entire GTA. I think it's also important to note that these type of condo townhomes, specifically the stacked back-to-back townhouse dwellings, they function a lot differently than a normal townhouse dwelling. So they're going to attract a different type of household. You're not going to get a large household or a household that has multiple vehicles being interested in this type of development because it's not feasible. They're going to know that if they're purchasing a stacked back-to-back townhouse dwelling, only one parking space is available. So
I mean, I'll follow up with the developer, but I think one of the resounding concerns from residents on Boyd and Ryder was that the overflow of or the lack of parking would result in overflow on Boyd Crescent right on top there, and then Ryder Crescent, which is right beside. You mentioned that no cars can go through, which is fine, but right now, outside of our parking enforcement bylaw, any extra cars can just be parked on Boyd Crescent, and then that the residents on Boyd Crescent didn't sign up for that ultimately. And in fact, I know a lot about this. I used to live in this neighborhood, and yeah, we would see cars there all the time. People going to the Audley Rec Center for baseball in the summer. So the concern ultimately is, I think reducing the 37 spaces creates a dearth of parking spaces that we need in this development. I think, I'm going to ask the developer who we're marketing these townhouses to, but if it's any family more than a single dude, then yeah, I think we're ultimately 2 cars is not out of the question, and that leads to the conflict, which ultimately comes at the feet of the councillors who are in charge of the ward. But again, I'll leave that to the developer. My next question is, what is the plan for garbage removal? So, as we can see, I mentioned the parking. You need a 3-point turn to turn around. There's no way a standard garbage truck could turn around. How are we removing garbage from this development?
So currently, what is proposed is an indoor garbage room that's in between blocks 2 and 3. So from the turning movement figures we've seen, the truck would enter into that room and then turn around from there. Like Jeff had mentioned, though, these type of details are the things that we continue to review and ultimately approve through the site plan approval process. Whether it stays as an indoor garbage room or we move towards maybe an in-ground garbage system like a Moloch system, it's still to be determined. The region also hasn't confirmed if they would be able to do garbage pickup in this situation. So there's still some details that need to be reviewed in order to determine that. But at a minimum, if they can't comply with regional standards, it would be private pickup. And we do have at least some auto turn figures that have showed a garbage truck going into that room and then backing out.
The reason I ask about garbage is because Councillor Dyes and I took a meeting earlier this summer with another development in Ward 2 where they couldn't get garbage removal from the region, and their current garbage solution is technically not legal according to the regional bylaws. So my concern is if a truck can't get in there based on private pickup or whatnot, then it's the developer leaving it up to the residents to say, hey, take care of the garbage yourself. And the residents may not know whether the first buyer or second buyer that they're in charge of garbage pickup. So again, I'll bring this up to the developer because I hope they're being explicitly clear about the garbage pickup and the cost of garbage pickup if it's not regionally done. And again, with the way this development is done, I don't think it'd be regionally done, but that's just, again, my 2 cents. My last question for staff, and thank you, Chair, for humoring me, is snow removal. If a snow truck were to go in there, I don't see where snow goes. And you'd have to elucidate as to where a plow would push mounds of snow off the road to clear it for the garbage trucks, clear it for the residents, because there's no place that I can see off this diagram, and I'm not an expert, of where mounds of snow can go. And we're seeing it more and more, harsher winters are creating larger piles of snow, which can't actually be moved. So if staff could address that.
Yep, that too. Once again, not a lot of details have been reviewed regarding that at this stage in the process. However, it would be a private service. So in terms of on-site spaces, realistically, you'd be left with all of just kind of the landscape open spaces or islands that are around where it would potentially have to go. If that's not adequate, I guess they could always explore kind of bringing it off-site as well. But there's different types of vehicles, like whether it be kind of like a bobcat type vehicle that could get in there, maneuver around, and clear the snow.
Or I would argue that it could also be used. They use the guest parking spots on the road, which then reduce the spots even more.
They could, and if I could jump in here, if they're not designated as snow storage and they were using those parking spaces as snow storage, then they would be in breach of the site plan approval, and they could be charged by bylaw services for not using the site in accordance with the approved plan. So there is recourse if that does happen on this site, but there are some. The benefit here is that with these back-to-back stacks is that we have underground parking. So some of the little amenity spaces in front of the buildings adjacent to the sidewalks, those can now accommodate snow storage, whereas before they would have traditionally been used up by driveways.
Okay. Chair, those are all my questions. Thank you, staff.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think Councillor Lee left anything much for me there, did he? But I did spend some time with Acting Director Romanowski, and he's assured me that most of our residents' concerns have been addressed. And but I do echo Councillor Lee's concerns about the parking, and I understand that we do have underground parking. Acting Director Romanowski showed me that, but the snow removal, and I did want to know about the garbage as well. Can you repeat why we're not using the region to pick up the garbage, please, Mr. Simpson?
So the region hasn't confirmed if their standards have been met. So the region has certain size vehicles. They need to make sure that their vehicle could fit in that indoor garbage room. In addition, it won't be most likely the typical curbside pickup that the region does, and that's just because the type of built form that's proposed. It would be hard to do that type of garbage pickup when you have back-to-back stacked townhomes and the frontages of blocks in 5 to 6 are fronting onto a trail. So there's no room for like a curbside pickup there. So most likely it is going to be in one concentrated area. It's just the details of that haven't been kinked out yet.
And this indoor garbage room, where is this supposed to be situated?
Right now it's proposed in between blocks 2 and 3.
So our biggest challenge with the region is that there's not enough room to get the trucks through, or the vehicles through, correct?
Yeah, they'd also have to make sure that the certain pavement structure used in that area supports their vehicles. But yeah, it would be the size would be the main thing.
And also how they move through the site can also be part of the criteria. Typically what the region requires is some type of flow through the site. They typically, like our fire service vehicles, they don't like backing up. They don't like backing down lanes or doing 3-point turns if they don't need to do that. So that not every development is conducive to regional pickup, but typically when it's private pickup and it's a condominium, that information gets inputted into the declaration that every homeowner would get when they purchase or when they transfer the sale of the lands. So, in the future, if it is just private pickup, that would be outlined in all purchase and sale documents for the owner. So they would be aware of that at the time of buying the property.
So what I'm seeing so far, there is a challenge with space. And at this point, we're being asked to approve an amendment from low density to medium density, correct?
In part, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask Mr. Simpson, thank you for your report on this. Can you speak in square footage, the size of the units? I'm pouring through your report here, but what's the smallest and largest size of each unit?
Yeah, so we don't actually have detailed floor plans submitted yet because, like we had said, there's no site plan application actually submitted yet. So I'm not entirely sure, but from what I do know, for the stacked back-to-back townhouse units, they'd be typically 2 and maybe some 2+ bedrooms, and they'd be about 1,000 square feet in size. Whereas the block townhomes, the 8 ones in block 1, would be 3 bedrooms, and I'm not entirely sure of the size. The developer could speak to that a little bit more better.
So you would say most of the units will be 2-bedroom then?
Yes,
Okay, thank you so much.
no problem.
Regional Councillor Dice?
Thank you. Just a quick question about the P gates for the emergency access. So most P gates that I have seen are fixed. How do these ones work so that they can get in?
It would be the same. The emergency services would be able to remove the P gate if they wish to go through, if they had to come in and exit. Otherwise, they would reverse out and just go through oddly as they would enter the same.
So they just pull out?
They just pull out, yeah.
Okay. My other question too is, and I know this is through the site plan as well, but the heat mitigation from intensification, there's a lot of buildings here, and I always bring this up about planting trees. So how are we going to ensure that we're planting trees that can mitigate some of that heat island effect on the buildings where people are living?
Yeah, through the required landscaping, there's going to be a series of trees, shrubs, all other vegetation that will need to be provided. Specifically, a lot of it will be provided along the southern portion of the limit, so the rear yards of block 1, which also helps with privacy concerns, as well as the western limit, so closer to the side yards of the homes along Boyd Crescent there. There's also planting opportunities within the southwest corner, which kind of acts as like an urban square. There'll be permeable surfaces throughout the development, through the walkways, throughout the square there. So there are multiple opportunities for that kind of vegetation.
Okay. And you did mention, I think it was on page 51, examples of green building and environmental design. They're proposed in this development. Can you give me an example of what they are?
It's just the vegetation. It's the permeable surface pavers. Will require light roofing materials. The blocks 2 and 3, as well as 4, 5, and 6, will all have green roofs as well, which helps towards that. That's mostly it, though.
Okay. And I just wanted to say I do share the concerns expressed about the garbage. I mean, that's day-to-day life, and if it doesn't function properly, there's a problem. And the region has sort of identified with the new developments recently that this is becoming more and more of an issue. So when they tell you that a truck can get in and out of there as a private pickup, they're looking at a smaller truck, but actually the vehicles that these companies use are much larger, like the region uses. So it's a real issue. And I just want to make sure that when you go through this site plan, that I know it goes out to all departments of the region, but specifically that we get some confirmation from the works department that this is going to work.
Absolutely, and waste management is becoming an increasingly common issue for us, and that's definitely flagged for our attention. So we won't be in a position to go forward with site plan approval until we have all those details addressed. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Eric. I appreciate it. Regional Councillor Lee asked my question. I was concerned about the number of parking spaces. To be short, 37 spots to me does, I'm not sure how that is reasonable, and I just wanted to ask about that, but thank you for answering it when it was asked by Regional Councillor Lee. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions to staff? Being none, I understand the proponent is here. Actually, just before we move on to that, Mr. Harris, I just wonder, since this is a public meeting, has any member of the public asked to speak to this matter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there were 3 opportunities or channels through which the public could choose to participate in tonight's live stream. One was through written submissions made to the Planning Department, which are included in the report from Mr. Simpson. The other was by oral submission through a dedicated telephone line. And lastly, if anyone was interested in participating, they could register with the clerk's office to be on the live stream tonight. Written comments were received and included in the report, and we did not receive any oral submissions to the telephone line or requests to participate on the live stream tonight.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I understand the proponent is here. If you'd like to come forward, there's a couple of questions.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And
Hi there, members of council. My name is Martin Clark-Capone, and I'm an associate with Weston Consulting. Here representing the applicant regarding his application for official plan and bylaw amendment. And I just wanted to say outright that I wanted to thank Eric and his team for putting together this report. It's been a long time coming, trying to gather all that feedback through the public. I know we're in very unusual times right now, so this must have been difficult for him. So I do appreciate his efforts, and Jeff as well. I think what I will do first is answer a question from council about the unit sizes. As part of our architectural package, there was a stat sheet that did provide areas of each of the floors of each of the different blocks. And as rounded numbers, the traditional townhouses that are in block number 1 that have the dedicated driveways and rear yards, they're at about 2,600 square feet. While the stacked townhouses are at about 1,000, just under 1,000 square feet per unit.
Thank you for that.
Not a problem. And as mentioned previously, no detailed floor plans were provided as they were not required. But as we go through that site plan process, that's been alluded to. That's the hopeful next stage of this project. What we'll be doing is defining those in a bit more detail, outlining the corridors and the spaces to ensure that we provide the most appropriate unit layout for these spaces.
I'd like to point out that the applicant itself, me, John Van Elsen, I'm here for questions and could make a statement if that's appropriate.
Not necessary. I think your statement is you agree with the staff report.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I thought there were particular questions that were addressed to me, but I can. No,
I'll open it up to questions just a minute. Just to clarify one thing to the consultant, are these all condominium?
That's correct. Yes, they all come off of Condominium Road.
So just to clarify for some of my colleagues, being condominium, I mean, the owners would expect, they wouldn't necessarily be expecting regional services because most condominium roads are private and it's private snow removal and private garbage as well.
Yes, you're correct, Mr. Mayor. That is a trend these days with these types of projects where you've got more higher density, medium density projects. They do usually expect a private service.
Right. Any questions to the proponent, the consultant from council? We have Regional Councillor Lee, then Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, and through the chair to the developer. First off, can you explain what happened with the removal of trees along Boyd Crescent? This was, I think, maybe a year ago. I received a few complaints that trees had just disappeared.
That's a question that I am not able to answer. Maybe what I'll do is, following questions through me, I may ask the applicant who's on the line to answer that question. That's okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Were there other questions of the?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was going to, yeah. Question number 2. So we got the rough size of the standalone towns and then the stacked ones. What is your demographic for these townhouses?
Well, given the size of the units, these would probably be geared to, I would say, what called the young professional. These are the independent individuals who require a bit of space, but not a ton of space. You're on regional roads here with future rapid transit coming down the pipeline. So these would be individuals that may likely not have a large family or need space for a large family. Whereas the traditional townhouses on the south side of the project, those might be geared towards, let's say, a traditional family that may have kids and then may need the space for kids. So with that, you've got that rear yard, and they've got the garage for one space as well as a driveway for a second. But the internal units and the stacked towns, I think, are looking for those young professionals that don't require the amount of space or the need for 2 car spaces through their lifestyle.
Well, I'm probably your demographic, to be honest. I'm a young professional. I'm married. I have a 2.5-year-old. And most other young professionals who choose to move to Ajax generally come from Toronto, generally have 2 cars. I think it's a very fair statement. I'm not trying to make things difficult to create a straw man argument just for the sake of creating the argument. But in any house in Ward 2 you go to, there's at least 1, if not 2 cars in the parking lot, sometimes on the skirt where they're not supposed to be. That's why parking becomes such a key issue that I keep bringing up and hammering home of 36 spaces or 37 spaces. Yes, I understand from your point of view, yeah, you're gonna get some people taking transit, but the bulk of most people will be driving. And so removing 37 spaces from these units is a detriment. And again, the complaints, they rarely come to the developer. They come to the town, they come to Bylaw, they come to the councillors. I did see, however, that to encourage transit use, you are offering transit passes as we'll call it a sweetener. Is that per resident, per household? How long are you committing to providing the passes for? How much are you giving the passes for?
Well, that's part of the exit we have to go through the site plan process, but you are correct, Councillor, that we will be providing that as a TDM measure as part of one of the various features to encourage transit use and not encourage automobile private use. So that is an element that we will be incorporating as part of our final approval of the site plan, but the exact numbers and dollar amounts, they will be offered per household when the unit is purchased, but in terms of the dollar amount, that's going to be worked through the site plan agreement process. That's the next part of this whole process.
So if I have 3 members living in the house, father, mother, teenager, we would get 1, in theory, based on your preliminary plans, 1 transit pass for the 3 of us, correct?
That has not been finalized, sir.
Okay.
All we know.
We'll go back to garbage removal. So my first question is, again, we have another development in Ward 2, and that's why I know a lot about this right now, because it was a significant issue where the developer, they had banked on private collection, which I understand, condominiums, they do that. So that's not out of the ordinary. But they didn't measure using the trucks that are used in North America, Canada. Rather, they used these smaller European trucks, which are not really in the standard private fleets, resulting in, again, issues with trash. So our planner gave a guess as to what the trash plan was. Can you kind of expand on that?
100%, Councillor. Again, as part of our architectural submission, there is a detailed design sheet that provides a bit more information on that garbage room. You can kind of see it on the plan on the screen right now, but in between blocks 2 and 3, there's a detailed design for that room. And it does show the loading bins that are proposed. We've got 11 bins within that garbage area. It does show the movement in entering as well as exiting that space. So a bit more detail and thought has been provided into that component of the development. And through what we've provided the town, we believe that design works based on what we've shown.
And the garbage itself, you keep saying room, so it's an enclosed space?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And will it be 3 streams, garbage, recycling, and green waste?
There will definitely be garbage and recycling. I'm not 100% sure about green waste, but I suspect there will be.
Okay, because again, that's also incredibly important. We had declared a climate emergency, saying that all kind of decisions from the town will be framed from the lens of, what's best for the climate and what's best for our long-term town. So that's important. Finally, it's my question is, where does the snow go? Where did you guys envision a snow plowing? I mean, the roads are pretty big, in comparison to these small gaps between the houses. Do you honestly think, based on last year's snowfall, which was higher than normal, but considerable, do you think you have enough space to put the snow away that won't inconvenience our neighbors on Boyd Crescent or anyone else? Or remove parking spaces?
No, just to your latter comment there, Councillor, about the parking spaces. The Con Corporation would ensure that the spaces that are required to be available for use are. And then they would not allow or permit those spaces to be used for snow storage. So that in our heads out of the question. As for on-site storage, we through the site plan process can find areas that can accommodate storage. But if you ask me in terms of can we accommodate, say, the worst snowfall of the year, probably not. So as part of our approval process, we will be looking at removal of snow on site when it occurs.
My last question, and thank you again, Chair, for being generous with time.
I just stop in just for a sec, Councillor Lee.
Sure.
I want just to remind council that we are doing an official plan amendment and amendment. What we see here as far as this drawing is not necessarily what's going to come forward to us when it's site plan. So what ifing garbage, snow removal, number of trees, all these things right now is probably premature. Those are things that'll be vetted during site plan. So asking all these questions now may not be the right time to do it. We're looking at the zoning and the
True. I thank the chair for that
so
comment.
it could change. So I don't. We're spending a lot of time on very specifics, but I just want to remind everybody that this could very probably change.
I just, unfortunately, because of COVID-19, the residents of Ward 2 weren't able to come out, whereas I feel they would have under different circumstances. So I just want to make sure a lot of their concerns are addressed. And so, no, it's a fair point that this is just a preliminary plan. And so I have no more questions then. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Crawford, Regional Councillor Crawford.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. This is very quick. I did want to confirm that we were only looking at the zoning here, but also that this site plan would come back to council. Is that true?
Not always, Mr. Romanowski.
Yeah, if I can, through the chair to Councillor Region and Councillor Crawford, site plan approval is delegated. Site plan approval is delegated to staff.
But we can.
So
we can
I have
council directs us to bring it back to the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. If that doesn't happen, we will be dealing with the site plan approval process at the staff level.
So I think, Your Worship, there has been a lot of concerns stated here today, and I'm prepared to make a motion that the site plan does come back to council, so that at least the ward councillors are satisfied that the issues that they have brought up today have been addressed. If that's appropriate, I'm willing to make that
Let's
motion.
get to the questions and we'll move that as an amendment when we get to the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because we don't actually have it on the floor right now.
Okay, sorry.
Bring that report forward at the end of questions.
Okay.
Were there any other questions to the proponent or the consultant from council? Okay, none. Does any member of council have a problem modifying the agenda to bring item 7.1 under departmental reports forward and dealing with it now? Nope. Okay, so we'll bring that forward. We have item 7.1 OPA application 19-A1 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1/19, 593 Taunton Road East, moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and seconded by Regional Councillor Dyes, that the official plan amendment OPA 19-A1 submitted by, I hope it's say Jean Al Gardens Plaza, as provided when an attachment 1 to this report be approved. And 2, that zoning bylaw amendment Z1/19 submitted by Jean L. Gardens Plaza as provided with an attachment to this report be approved. And Regional Councillor Crawford, you would like to move an amendment, item 3, that this site plan come back to council for approval.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, it's the clerk here. May I interrupt for a moment?
Go ahead, Ms. Cooper.
Thank you. I just wanted to just point out, under our delegation of authority bylaw for site plan approval, it actually doesn't require a motion of council to request that a site plan come back to council. Any individual member of council can make that request anytime, and it will be so. So just by Regional Councillor Crawford indicating that desire, that site plan is now required to come back to council for approval.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Does it hurt to have the amendment, or do we?
It's not necessary, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
It's already on the floor, so you either have to withdraw, or we can just go ahead with the amendment. Either way, it's your amendment.
Okay, I would actually like to ask my fellow colleagues on Ward 2 if you would like to stay on the recommendation. I'm totally fine to leave it.
No, you can. I can't speak for local councillor Khan, but you can withdraw if it's part of the policy. Then we'll get another chance to talk about the site plan, the specific site plan specifics.
Mr. Romanowski, you have that direction?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Uh,
on that, does anybody wish to speak to the resolution?
No.
Okay, those, and are any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. We have one more report, that is Mr. Grieve on traffic calming warrant update. When you're ready, please, Mr. Grieve.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to yourself and members of council. As you know, my name is John Grieve. I'm the Supervisor of Transportation with the town of Ajax, and I'm here to give you a brief update on the traffic calming warrant update project that we are currently undertaking. So the contents of my presentation tonight, very high level. What is traffic calming? I think most of you are well aware what it is and what it means to the town. A history of what traffic calming is for the town of Ajax. A brief overview of the proposed evaluation process that has been flushed out as part of our update process. Update on the Ravenscroft Road pilot project that has installed the traffic calming bollards that we introduced in this project. Some more detail on those bollards and what elements are associated with them. An update on other traffic calming projects in the town of Ajax. And then just a brief overview of the project timeline from now to completion of this project. So very high level, what is traffic calming? As you all know, it's a toolbox of options for engineering, design, education, and enforcement measures. Ultimate goal of traffic calming is to reduce vehicle speeds, alter driver behavior, and improve road safety conditions. These measures can be installed individually or in combination with one another. Those types of measures, there's two types. There's a physical measure, which are the speed bumps, the speed humps, the raised crossings, raised intersections, curb extensions, or there are soft measures such as signage and enforcement. So a history of traffic calming in the town of Ajax. This will actually be the third version of the traffic calming warrant for the town. The first was approved by council in 2007. It was, as I said, first of its kind, established traffic calming criteria, established the process. It was deemed that it needed updating as a result of an onerous public consultation process. At the time, in order for a project to be approved and constructed, once designed, a survey was required to be mailed out to all residents along the corridor. That survey required a 50% response rate. And then of those responses, 60% had to be in favor of the proposed design. If those criteria weren't met, the project did not proceed. So it was felt that that was an overly onerous process. In 2015 was the first update and the traffic calming warrant that we currently use. It introduced the concept of high-end speeders. These are speeders that are exceeding a set threshold given the road designation. They typically are the ones that are causing the most concern or pose the most concern for safety. There was an elimination of score-based ranking. So in the first warrant, the project that had the highest points would be deemed priority. In 2015, that was removed. And as I said, the refinement of that public engagement process with the removal of the public survey, there is still a public process. We still go to the public for their input, but we don't require that survey response. So in 2020, we will be bringing forward our update. The improvements are related to the evaluation process to make it more responsive and adaptive. We are confirming that our warrant criteria is based on best practices and current industry standards, and we are identifying if there are any new traffic calming mitigation measures that we want to add to our toolbox, such as the bollards that you see in our pilot along Ravenscroft. So the proposed evaluation process that we have come to at this point in the process largely remains consistent with what the process is today. Focusing in on the section in the red box is where the change exists. So after we do an evaluation process, we come to a recommended traffic calming treatment. Previously, we would just go into our toolbox and assess which was the best solution. In this case, we now split into two streams. One stream going to the bollard solution. We feel this is a solution that is cost effective. Is a cost-effective solution, but also a effective traffic calming solution. So it allows us to implement quickly, but still achieve results. And then we would filter down into monitoring. If a segment we felt had site characteristics that weren't conducive to the bollards, we still do have the rest of the toolbox and all of those other measures I did mention available to us, and can evaluate and implement them. Still ending up at the monitoring phase. This is also being enhanced within the new warrant. We want to ensure that once we build something, we are monitoring it to ensure that it is meeting the reduction targets that we want. If reduction targets aren't met, we are able to go back and reevaluate and see, do we need to modify the mitigation measure that has been implemented. So as part of this traffic calming warrant update, we decided to implement the Ravenscroft pilot program. This was an opportunity to take a road segment that had been identified as a warranted segment under our current process and try a piloted solution, which was the bollard solution that you all have seen, and you can see in the picture on the center of the screen. On the slide here is some data from the initial review that we did in the fall. You'll see at each location in the yellow to brown bars represents the yellow bars pre-installation volume of traffic. The brown bar is post-installation of volume of traffic. You can see there was a significant reduction along the corridor, which is a positive. We do want to ensure that that traffic isn't infiltrating, so there is further evaluation we need to take, but a reduction in traffic is a positive step. With regards to speeds before and after, so the pink to the red bars, you can see at location 1 we saw a drop, location 2 remained the same, and actually location 3 increased. So we do feel that this initial installation was incomplete, or our pilot wasn't fully realized. One thing to note is we did receive a lot of support for the pilot. It was well received, or we felt it was well received by the public, and I do believe a number of you on council felt it was a strong option or a good solution for the road. So just a little bit more on what those bollards, or what we are introducing when we say we're talking about bollards as a traffic calming solution for the town of Ajax. So related to the bollards and pavement marking, our standard installation will be one bollard that is placed along the center line. It will be that wide bollard that you can see in the picture below. That bollard, the graphic that is on it, can be interchanged. You have a number of options. The one on the picture is at a supervised crossing, so we have the same sign that is roadside is put on the bollard. Other options are the speed limit and some other standard road signs can be placed in the middle. Two bollards are placed along the edge of the road, which make a defined or a slightly narrowed travel width between the bollards for vehicles and slowing them down. We will paint a center line in all projects if there isn't one present. And we also consider on wider roads potentially painting edge lines or other markings. With regards to signage, we have to install no parking signage if not present, or if not already present, around these bollards to ensure that people don't park in the close vicinity to them, and blocking the path between them. And then we're also looking at using speed boards, permanent speed boards on these segments as a way of doing some effective monitoring. And so those will be optional measures as part of the bollard or standard bollard installation. So just to update you on the outstanding capital traffic calming projects. So we have approved capital budgets for 2018 for Old Harwood, for 2019 Warner and Linton, and then we have an approved budget for 2020 projects. We are proposing this evening, and I'll show you in just a moment, that a portion of the approved capital budget be used to implement replacement traffic calming measures on Seward and Emperor. So Seward in Ward 2 and Emperor in Ward 3 received temporary traffic calming measures in 2015-2016 through discussions with operations, who has been managing their installation and removal every year. We have learned that they have met their usable life. We had actually a number of issues with them over our last season, with them pulling out of the road, and so they aren't able to be installed again this year. So we're proposing to use, as I said, a portion of the budget to do a replacement measure for those roads. There are then 14 other projects that are on our previously warranted list. They have not been forgotten. They remain on the list. They were tested as part of our current warrant and remain warranted. Through this process, they will be evaluated, and we will look at potential measures for them as we finalize this traffic calming warrant. And then in the fall, our intention is to, at the time of presenting the finalized traffic calming update, we will present an update on these projects. Our hope is that a number of these will be part of the remaining budget for 2020, and then the others will remain on our list for implementation in future years. Given our new approach to traffic calming, where we are simply identifying a typical amount or a standard amount, and with the introduction of new, more affordable options, yet effective options like the bollards, our hope is that we will actually be able to increase the number of projects we complete annually. In the past, we've been completing 2 or 3 projects. In the case of our current budget, and if all roads were designated for bollards, we would likely be able to install 5 or 6 locations in a year, therefore allowing us to work through warranted projects much more quickly and eliminate the events where a resident has a request, they've been told that a project is warranted, and then they wait 3, 4, 5 years for that solution to be installed. We feel that that's just far too long, and we hope, and our intention with this update is to create a process that is much more, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, responsive and adaptive, so that we are able to cut the time down from when a resident makes a request to when a solution is implemented, should that road segment be deemed warranted. So that's the ultimate goal for this traffic calming update. So what is proposed for the construction season this summer, so 2020 construction season, is to finalize the proposed design for Ravenscroft Road. As I said when I discussed the initial results, we clearly identified there was some need for additional locations and a closer look at that corridor. So this is the proposed design we have come up with. I'm going to walk through the proposed design for this location, for Emperor and for Seaward. The intention is these proposed designs will go to the public sometime in June. I'm still working with communications, or I need to work with communications to figure out how we are going to do that in our current COVID realities. So the exact format is still being determined, but they will all see the required public meeting where residents will have their opportunities to comment on our proposed designs. So Ravenscroft Road, there are 5 existing sets of bollards indicated in blue. Those, as I said, those were installed last year. They have been reinstalled this spring, so they are there on the roads currently. We are proposing 4 new sets indicated in red to be installed this summer. And then we've identified 4 potential locations for speed boards, 2 that would be facing vehicles heading southbound, and 2 that would be facing vehicles that would be headed northbound. Our intention is not to install 4 boards. Our intention would be to install 1 or 2 boards, and they would be rotated through these locations. We are also looking into the technology options and the costs of those, because there are some boards that can collect in both directions at the same time. They would only flash a number in the one direction, but they would have the ability to collect the speed of a vehicle traveling from the other direction. So we're looking at what the costs are for those types of boards and if they are feasible to be included in our process. So for Seaward, we are replacing 2 temporary temporary speed bumps. They were located actually approximately in the middle. So the proposed design is 3 bollards on each side of Williamson. On the south piece, sorry, not of Williamson, of Seaward, 3 on the west leg, 3 on the east leg. The south portion of Seaward has an existing raised crossing that obviously will remain. It's a permanent raised crossing. You can see it heads right into the little parquet that's at the bottom of the screen. So the proposed is 3 new bollard sets. The existing, or where the temporary measures were at the middle of those 3. So we're putting a bollard set right in the general location where they were, and then adding additional bollard sets. With this, we're proposing to paint a center line. Again, by defining the space, you are starting to give visual clues that also help slow down motorists. And in this location, we aren't proposing a speed board at this time, but could be considered should the should we receive comments from council or members of the public that is something they think is necessary. And finally, the proposed design for Emperor. In this location, we're replacing 3 temporary cushions. So they're larger than a speed bump. They're actually I believe it's 3 or 4 meter cushion that actually requires 96 bolts to put down, which I thought was unbelievable how many bolts were required to put these down. But I digress. So those 3 will be replaced with 6 sets of bollards. Again, painting a center line on this road. And then we've identified 2 potential locations along Seaward, 1 facing east, 1 facing west. On Emperor. Of note, there are 2 stop signs along Emperor. So there's a stop sign at Bircher, and then there's the stop sign closer to Harwood at the I forget the intersection, but just before Harwood, that's a full stop sign as well. So that's why we've located those signs to the east end of the segment, because you're in a relatively large segment where you have a straight shot. We will have those bollards, but those we felt were an appropriate location for potential speed boards. So what are the next steps in the project timeline? So I'm giving you this update presentation this evening. I actually spoke with senior management team last week, giving them a similar presentation. The consultant who is completing our traffic calming warrant is scheduled to provide staff with a completed draft in June. As I mentioned this evening, we will do some type of public review for the construction of those 3 projects in June before summer. The format and date is to be determined, but it will occur in June. We will construct the final elements of Ravenscroft, as well as the new measures for Seaward and Emperor in July and August. By doing so, we actually can collect data on those 3 locations in September and include it as part of our warrant. Being all 3 proposed to have bollards on them, we feel that it's a good, it would represent a strong test.
I'm going to need to get you to wrap this up, please.
Okay, this is the last slide. So we'll do data collection, present the final warrant in September, and we will present to yourselves in October the final warrant for your endorsement. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Questions, Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, John, for your presentation. Could you please go back to the results of the bollards on Ravenscroft? I'm actually surprised and disappointed at the results of Daniel and Brennan. The speed actually increased, and if I'm not mistaken, that's actually a controlled crosswalk. So I'm wondering if you have any idea why the speeding would actually increase when there's 2 sets of bollards right there.
So through the chair to Councillor Crawford, the location is not right, or the location where we collected the data is not right at Daniels, where those crosswalks are. It's in the location between Daniels and Brennan. I agree with you. There is some concern that we saw that change, or that slight increase. I believe, or given that there was a significant reduction in volume, the 85th can slightly, the 85th percentile speed can slightly increase as a result of that drop, but that doesn't fully explain that. So that's why we know we need additional locations along Ravenscroft. We believe we've appropriately located them. And as I said, monitoring is going to be a significant emphasis as part of this warrant. So even after we install these new locations, we will continue to monitor Ravenscroft and all of our other traffic calming locations. And should additional tweaks be required, we are committed to continue to do those. And that is the one benefit of, or that is an additional benefit of bollards, is they are easily moved and easily moved small distances when you need to slightly tweak a solution or a measure that you've installed.
I know that this isn't part of this report. I'm a little saddened because I know you have to update the traffic warrants to include bollards as part of your phasing in road calming, but this, I believe, has set back at least a few of the projects in 2019 capital budget. We had identified a number of projects that were supposed to go forward in 2020. Delaney and Sims were 2 of those projects. And while they had not come off the list, it does look like it's not going to happen now until 2021 as far as construction goes. Is even if we start public consultation in September, there's no way that we're going to put anything in before the snow hits. So it does delay both of those streets, in my opinion. Am I right or wrong?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford. First part related to the identification of them in the long-range capital forecast. So the only comment I would have to that is that it was a long-range forecast at that time. It was what we anticipated would be constructed. As you know, we made a change to how the budget was approved in 2020, going away from the specifically listed projects to a bulk commitment to allow us to do more projects. quite frankly, yes, there has been a slight delay to the traffic calming warrant um, overall update. We had hoped to have this approved by council prior to the summer break, and therefore would have allowed us to do all of our 2020 projects, which could have included Delaney and Sims. But the reality is the project was slightly delayed given the COVID situation, and we did not feel comfortable presenting designs for our complete 2020 program based on a old warrant. We felt that council would want to ensure that it was based on the current warrant that we are proposing. So that's why we chose to hold back the remaining 2020 projects until we have this new updated warrant with all the potential measures identified and approved by this council.
And that's fair. I guess my concern is that corner on Brennan and Daniels, it has now become my walking route, as I've been told to walk about 4 times a day. There's a lot more people on the street. There's a lot more people on bikes, which I'm thrilled with. But it also means that there's a lot more people at risk on that one corner. So I'm not 100% sure that, I mean, I'm no traffic analyst, but I'm not 100% sure that painting a center line down the center and adding, like, it seems to me that what's happened is they've sped up between bollards, and that's where the catches happen. So well, I do like the bollards, and I think that they have been effective, a first step measure. I think that we're going to have to go a little bit further on that one, but I'm happy to hear that the addition of more bollards are going to be happening this year before the snow. So, and you were saying that this Ravenscroft does have to go back out to public consultation.
Yes, that is correct. It along with Seward and Emperor, will be consulted with the public in June in a to be determined format.
Okay, all right, that's great. Yeah, I would hate to think that where we've come now with all the technology that we have, that we can't be able to put something together so that we can have a true public consultation on this. I think it's important. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Or Your Worship, my bad, Your Worship.
That's fine. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Your Worship, Chair. Through the chair to Mr. Grieve, this the bollard system, you had mentioned that it removes parking. We had to put no parking signs. Have you guys gamed out how many parking spaces we'd be losing on these streets overall?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, I don't have the numbers specific in front of me, but in any given installation, we look to minimize parking loss because we do realize that residents in the town of Ajax expect the availability of on-street parking, and specifically where it has historically been available, and for us to go in and remove that is not desired. I believe when we installed those first 5 locations, if I remember correctly, we lost in the magnitude of 10 to 12 spaces along the whole corridor. So it's not insignificant, but it is also not a large number. We do, as I said, we try to locate them in places where parking restrictions already exist. So in the case of at Daniels, where there's the crossing, you're being near an intersection, you already have those restrictions. We'll locate near a fire hydrant where a restriction already exists. For example, in the case of Seward, one side of that street is already signed as no parking, so we will lose less parking on that road than one may think. Right. And same with Emperor, there are already restrictions on the one side of the street. So we absolutely try to minimize any loss, and when we would go to the public, we would have that count available so that we could respond to any question that would come up.
Thank you for that. My next question is, so in 2015, we removed scores that dictated our traffic calming. That's what I read, correct?
Through the chair, we reduced score-based ranking. So we still score every project, and every project is still required to meet a minimum score based on the road type. But we eliminated the practice of simply building the road that had the highest score first.
But somewhere there's a overall ranking of all the roads. Is that correct?
Through the chair, there is a list. They are not
Right.
ranked.
And the top of the list presumably is roads that are priority versus the bottom of the list, which is not priority, correct?
Through the chair, I wouldn't say that that is correct. To me, it is a list. And every year with the new process and the new practice, my intention is to build as many projects as I have or as I can from that list.
So let me rephrase then. Each street has a score attached to it, correct? And it may not necessarily be the highest score gets priority, but each street has a score, correct?
Correct.
Why don't we, in the sake of transparency, just list out this list with the caveat that it's a living document, it's constantly being updated? Because I think ultimately a lot of our residents don't know the full intricacies of the traffic calming system. So I just got a complaint today from a resident who said, Westney and Williamson on the west side, people are speeding by. And I always explain to them that there's a score assigned and may not reach the traffic warrant. But ultimately, it results in me having to email you, which I'm going to do, asking for what the score is and where it ranks. And why doesn't the town just publish the information? What is the con in just showing the full transparency of our roads?
So through the chair to Councillor Lee, there is no reason why we couldn't. I would simply caution that without a thorough understanding of how we get to those scores, I would potentially be concerned that we could end up in a system or have residents believing in the highest number is the most priority. There are other circumstances that transportation staff consider when looking at selecting which projects proceed in a given year. So by posting your score, you could, bring back a priority-based feel. I think posting the list of all warranted projects is definitely something we should start doing so that people are aware that we haven't forgot about your project. It's on our list. It continues to be on our list.
Right.
Perhaps just not putting the 51 out of a possible 80 points attached to that. I don't know if that's necessary for the public to have, readily available in a.
That's fair. I understand that.
In a public posting.
You had mentioned that we can at least put the warranted streets on some sort of list accessible through the internet. Is that part of the plan then? Because again, it's I've been on this council for almost 2 years now, and I still don't understand why it's like a request to you each time we want to tell a resident why the road isn't like we're all adults. Sorry, not all, but the people who are complaining are adults who just want what's best for their street. And I for one would be more comfortable if I just had that information readily available, saying, hey, this is the last time we did the warrant. This is the approximate score of where you stand based on priority. And it's just then I like the fact that it was a numbers-based, fact-based system. Right. And to your point, it wasn't necessarily a priority, but it's anecdotal, your stories of people speed on my street all the time. And I think we should have some transparency to that effect through a website.
Through the chair, I agree. And I think that is something we will look to evolve. I'm also, I would also anticipate we are going to propose that myself or someone from transportation gives council an annual update on statistics related to how many roads did we test, how many met the warrant, what does our list look like? And so there'll be some sort of annual briefing to yourselves as members of council as well, because I believe that also helps with transparency and you understanding what's on the list and showing that, we continue to test, far more than we warrant, and the ones we warrant are there for a reason. And then we are working to get those constructed and built as promptly as we can.
And Chair, this is the last ultimately statement. Is it in our 2020 right now to have this website up and running, showing our warranted roads?
Through the chair, it absolutely could be. I would say it is part and parcel with the approval of the proposed new warrant. I would anticipate that those changes be rolled out as part of that, which we are bringing this back to council in in September or October.
Well, I will definitely be bringing that forward if it's not already on there, because again, I think it's very easy information. We have it, and the more we share, the more our customers or constituents are informed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, John. I think you've got a complicated job. You can tell by the comments and questions that are within this. I appreciate that you spoke of Sims. I appreciate that you spoke of Delaney. I'm a little frustrated at the project timelines on all these streets and everything that goes down. You did speak a lot to that tonight, and I appreciate it. I have a couple of questions. Number one, is the open house going to be happening virtually in June, did you say? Or are we going to try and wait for a physical? To be determined.
To be determined. It will happen
Okay.
in June.
Okay.
I would say it's likely it will be virtual given the realities we live in right now,
Okay.
but it will happen in June.
And do you know which streets will be considered in that open house?
The three that I presented to you this evening. So the completion of Ravenscroft and then the solutions for Emperor and Seaward.
So Sims is not going to be as part of that open house, and Delaney's not going to be part of that open house?
So through the chair to regional or Councillor Tyler Moore, as I mentioned to Councillor Crawford, our town staff decided to withhold the remaining projects for our 2020 budget until we had council approval on the new warrant. We didn't want to propose a design for a road segment that would be not the optimal design solution, given that we are in the midst of a warrant update. So the remaining projects for 2020 are going to be presented in the fall when we have the completed warrant.
Okay, if I may, Your Worship. So in the 2019 capital budget, it's listed Delaney Drive, Sims, Warner, Linton Avenue, Ravenscroft. That capital budget was approved by council, correct? And so those streets at that time, so you're saying there's another level of approval that needs to happen? Just if you could explain that to me, because it was already, I assumed, in motion and ready to.
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore. Delaney and Sims were not approved as part of the capital budget in 2019. They were simply identified in the long range capital forecast for 2020 through 2024. When we presented the 2020 capital budget, we altered or changed the way we report on our capital detail sheets to change to the non-listed segment. The purpose for that is, again, we felt it would make us more adaptable and responsive to traffic calming issues, as well as provide a more consistent financial reporting structure for finances. The reason we felt that is you'll see, for example, in 2019, we have a budget of, I believe, 190 something thousand for traffic calming on two segments. The designs that have been proposed for those segments are going to be far less than those proposed budgets, and therefore, don't accurately reflect, the measures or the magnitude that could have been changed. So,
okay. I'm just trying to keep this moving here. So right now there's 14 identified streets that you presented just earlier, and you were saying that in the past it's been about 2 or 3 projects a year, and you're hoping to get to 5 projects a year. So that list of 14 would be spread out over 3 years. Is that the goal?
Through the chair, yes. The goal is to try to clear that list as quickly as possible, and as I previously stated this evening, in the past, projects have sat on the list for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and I believe with this new process that I'm describing and that we will be laying out in the new traffic calming warrant, we won't have that happen anymore, and we will be able to be more responsive.
Rob.
Okay, if I may sum it up really quickly. So I think there needs to be a deeper discussion on project timelines, just in regards to traffic. It just seems like everybody's frustrated by this. We're frustrated. Residents are frustrated. It seems to take too long. And I say that respectfully. It's just something we can. Last question. The center line on Ravenscroft, Bullers are in, center line's not in, I don't believe. In the future, will it be put in quick? And in the future, when you put bollards on other streets, will the center line be included during the installations? My last question.
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Martin, yes, you're correct. So in the future, we will install all elements at once. With Ravenscroft, last year we wanted to get the bollards in, didn't have time to paint the center line. So Ravenscroft is the exception, not the rule. We will go back and put down a center line this summer. But standard practice will be to put it down before the bollards go down.
Thank you, John. Mr. Grieven. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So John, you're doing a couple of things on Emperor. So you're doing the replacement measures of the temporary speed bumps, or the summer ones, if you want to call them that. You're also going to doing a proposed design. For the proposed design, are you going to go back to the public for input on that, on Emperor?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, yes. So as mentioned this evening, Emperor will be part of that presentation in June, where we will be presenting the design I just spoke to this evening and looking for public feedback on what is proposed. And that's where they will have the opportunity to comment. And town staff will.
John, the answer is yes. You've answered the question. Joanne, next one, please.
So thank you. I appreciate that, because there's still some concerns about those speed bumps, and I'd be interested to hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Bauer. You're muted, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John, for that report. Very interesting. I actually would like to say that I'm very happy to see that your department has a proactive goal of speeding up the action between recognizing that there's a need for calming and then doing it. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I wanted to say the public review portion of these three proposed areas is very, very important. So I'm glad that you're looking at different options. And I don't know if you've looked at, council just had ward meetings last couple of weeks that we live streamed on Facebook. They were very interactive and well attended. So I'd like to put that suggestion out to you as a way, if it's going to be virtual, that might be something to look at for trying to get that engagement. And then my question is, there's a couple of streets from Ward 3. Actually, I'm glad to see Emperor on that list. Thank you. A couple of streets from Ward 3 that you and I have talked about previously that I don't see on the list. So I'm just going to just confirm that they are on a list, just not on the list that you presented tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct. They are on a list to complete the assessment that we spoke about earlier this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple, Mr. Grieve, with regards to Ravenscroft. I'm very frustrated that I understand getting the bollards in last year, but I mean, nobody saw COVID coming. I get it, but I understand we need to go through the public process before we can paint a line. Question mark?
The what is being installed this summer is more than just a line. It'll be the 4 additional locations. And this is simply what we are proposing as town staff. There is the potential that through the feedback I've received from council tonight and any feedback we receive from the public in June, that the proposed design could change.
Okay, but the proposed design for that area with the bollard is already done, right? Yes?
Correct, but it is proposed. It's not necessarily what will be finally installed in the summer.
Well, the bollards are in and the line was part of that design. So I don't understand why we have to wait for the others to get a line painted on the road. That's what I'm not getting. I mean, the residents have been promised something. It's been a long time getting to this stage. And now something, the matter of, I understand running out of weather and it being too cold, but it's not too cold anymore. Why can't we get this line and the approved stuff done? Why does it have to wait for another public process on a new piece?
So we can look into that. I would say mobilizing a line painting crew for a single line wouldn't be cost effective. And given that we are halfway through May and we would be looking for a July installation, it may be more cost effective and a better use of resources to do when we do all installations in July. But as a takeaway from this evening, I can look at the feasibility of deploying a line painting crew for that stretch of Ravenscroft.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand why. I mean, we own a lot of roads, and to me, if we want to paint a line on a road that we own, we can paint a line on a road. I don't know why this has to be a public process at all. The bollards, I suppose I understand, but I mean, if you're going to paint the line, paint it all the way up where it's going to be. Is I guess what I'm saying. I agree, it doesn't make sense to do one piece and then come back. I just am not understanding why that needs to be part of the public process if it's already in there. Just like we already have signboards, speed boards sitting in storage. I asked for them to be put out in this location, which kind of prompted this presentation we've had tonight. Why don't we just put them out? It's not hurting anybody. It's doing better on the road than it is in storage, and we don't have to go through public process for that.
So the boards that are in storage are our mobile boards, and we can absolutely look at deploying those.
We've already said deploy them on Ravenscroft, and we were asked to wait till after this presentation tonight.
Understood, and that was to show or present the proposed design that is to have permanent locations on Ravenscroft. In the meantime, in advance of the permanent locations that would be installed in July, we can look at deploying the mobile signs. However, those mobile signs are typically used by our department on a rotational basis where we place them on a road segment for 2 weeks at a time and rotate them through the town. So to simply use them and deploy them to Ravenscroft until the permanent boards are ready, I believe would be, using
when was the last time that your department used those speed boards?
Last summer we had them deployed between May and October.
Do you have an initial use for those speed boards in the next 2 weeks?
Yes, potentially.
What street?
I would have to look at our proposed schedule. That schedule was put on hold due to the restrictions, because as the way they are deployed by my staff, and my staff are stretched thin at the moment. So to safely deploy them is not an option at this point. I can speak with Director Bridgman and her staff at operations to see if they can assist us in their deployment, and we will see if we can get them deployed to Ravenscroft as soon as possible.
These are mobile speed boards. They're like a trailer, aren't they?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so to pull a trailer up and park it and put it on blocks or whatever needs to be done, I have several trailers and I have no problem putting one in a place. I don't think this is a big job.
To do it safely, it should be done by 2 staff.
Okay.
That is town practice.
All right, I'll tell you what, tomorrow I will sit down with some people and we'll see if we can find 2 staff to get those in, and they can sit there on Ravenscroft until you need them. Is that a problem?
No, as I said, I will speak with Director Bridgman and we will come to a solution.
Just to your presentation on Ravenscroft, you had zones 1, 2, and 3, and the 85th percentile of speed. I guess I understand why the volume went down. People want to avoid being slowed down, I guess. But the numbers don't seem to show that. The 85th percentile for zone 1 went from 52 to 46. And I mean, the three-way stop at Ventris is really, nobody stops there. We had a pretty major accident about a month ago just at Radford and Ravenscroft by a car that there's no way it could have stopped at Ventris because it couldn't make the corner it was going so fast. It took out all the garbage cans and everything and almost a tree. So, I mean, the bollards are nice looking, but to go from 52 to 46, that's in zone 1. In zone 2, there was no speed reduction at all. It stayed at 52. And zone 3, the speed actually increased up Ravenscroft. So looking at those numbers from the bollards, I'm not sure how effective they are.
Okay, and I take your feedback, and you know, as we mentioned, we felt the deployment of those locations along Ravenscroft were what I will say is inconclusive, and that is why we are proposing those additional locations. We felt the spacing that we deployed them last fall wasn't appropriate, and you'll notice that the new proposed spacing is much tighter. We feel that that will be effective, but like any traffic calming measure, it will require monitoring, and we are committed to that monitoring. And should our proposed solution be ineffective, that is where that feedback loop I spoke of in my presentation kicks in, and we look at alternative measures to achieve the reduction that we are looking for.
Okay. We also have bollards on Clements, west of Harwood, and on Emperor. Do you have the numbers on those? Can you provide, I don't need them now, but can you provide council with the numbers on those that we experienced in those locations, please?
Yes.
Okay. And finally, just you mentioned when Council Lee was asking about the scoring, you mentioned you didn't want it to become priority based, and I tend to think it should be absolutely priority based. That way the assets, because we have limited finite amount of funds for traffic calming, that those funds are directed to the highest priority location. When we started this review of the traffic warrant, it was speaking to the 2015 changes. I mean, you talk to the onerous process of the survey. Marilyn Crawford and I actually gone door to door on Delaney and trying to get people to sign the survey. It doesn't work. Another one of the scoring processes was the number of accidents. And quite often a location would meet the warrant based on everything, but didn't have enough accidents. So I understand about getting rid of some of the scoring based on that, but I think, again, we have to have a way of prioritizing these to make sure that the money is going to the best effect in the most problem area.
I agree with you. So let me just clarify what I was saying. The scoring, the criteria that you see in the existing warrant is going to largely remain unchanged in the proposed warrant. We are not throwing away that process. We will end up with a score. My caution to posting that score was simply that without a full understanding of all of the criteria, how you accumulate points in that criteria. I don't want to go back to the system that was done in 2007, where simply the most points goes first. Because in that system, you run the risk of a project that is on the list, has been on the list for a year or two, being bumped every year by a newly tested road and sits on our list indefinitely. So there needs to be transparency and parity amongst all of them to an extent, all of our road segments to an extent, so that we don't run the risk of simply putting a project on the list that never gets off because it gets bumped every year by a higher scored road.
Okay, that makes more sense. All right, those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Grieve.
If I can, Mayor Collier, just jump in. I did have a side conversation with Director Bridgman, and we've come to terms with operations to deploy the speed boards as well as do the appropriate line painting on Ravenscroft.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, that concludes the presentations. Thank you, Mr. Grieve. Moving on to correspondence. Do we have any items of correspondence that council wishes to pull? Who do we have? Regional Councillor Dyes? Which one?
Thank you. I'm going to pull, it's on page 13. It's the letter
Okay, number 2, item 2,
Yeah, I don't have the list in front of me, sorry.
the one to do with the poverty reduction strategy.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Lee?
Number 3, please.
3. Lisa Bauer?
Item number 4, please, Mayor.
4. Any other polls? Okay, being none, on the balance, we have moved by Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Khan. The report dated May 19, 2020, containing items of correspondence be adopted. That is the items that are not pulled. Those in favor or any opposed? None opposed? Those are carried. Okay, Councillor Dies, item 2.
Thank you very much. So it's just a letter that was commenting to the province on the work that they're doing on homelessness. And Councillor Lisa Bauer and myself worked on this with the homelessness task force here in Ajax. So as you know, it's always a struggle as to what to do, but basically we've thrown out a different type of approach, which is a housing first strategy approach. And just to share a little bit of that, so it's a different way of thinking and a different way of understanding how you approach this issue. But as we do now, it's like a Band-Aid sort of solution as we go along. This housing first strategy gives them a home. So the government invests in building enough housing for them. And then once they have that sense of place and they have a better sense of safety as well, and they settle in, then they start to put the programs in place that help the individual move forward. This sort of program has saved a lot of dollars in many in Eastern Europe, in Helsinki and in New York, where they've tested it out, because at the end of the day, as a person becomes more secure and gets the help that they need, they are able to, find employment and they do move on. So the services that you provide through social services and healthcare, those costs are significantly reduced, and in other areas as well. So I just wanted to throw that out for people to think about, and you can look online for more information on that strategy. And just thank you to the Homelessness Task Force for their dedication and the work on this. Thank you.
Okay, you want to move that to be received for information?
I'll move it.
Seconded by Councillor Bauer.
Thank you.
Any opposed to that being received for information? Being none. Moving on to Regional Councillor Lee, item 3.
Thank you. This is actually a letter Councillor Bauer and I had written to the Minister of Families from the province. It's actually it's very aligned to the council position we had taken, I think about a year ago, in support of needs-based therapy for families with autistic or special needs children. This just kind of takes the next step and brings it into the COVID-19 forum, because ultimately families that, we've all struggled through this process, whether you're doing well or not. I mean, it's not been easy, but I met with a parent who just kind of outlined how difficult the struggle is and how the province, unfortunately, has not addressed this.
Councillor Lee, before you go any further, do you wish to move that we endorse this?
Yes, move to endorse.
Okay, because you can't speak to it and then move it.
Oh, very good.
So now you can speak to it.
Very good. Here we go. So yes, just continue. Thank you, Chair. So just continuing. There's not much supports mechanisms built in, whereas there's been some for businesses and whatnot. So this is just an area that Councillor Bauer and I thought would be a great continuation from the previous council motion of just encouraging the province to possibly look out for the those that are in need of help. And this is something I'll be bringing to the region, this time seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford next Wednesday. But I was just hoping I could get council endorsement for this letter today.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this matter? Councillor Crawford?
Yeah, of course I support this. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We need to support our autistic families, families that are struggling with lack of funding and children with autism. It's more a question around process. In the previous letter, we were all CC'd on the letter. On this one, we're not even named in this letter, except are we covered under all of Durham regional municipal councils? I'm just curious on letters that are going to the province. I don't understand why we weren't even CC'd on this.
I'll just speak to it quickly, and then I'll ask the clerk if I miss anything. I wasn't going to speak to that. I agree with the process. I think just process-wise, this may have been more had more weight coming as a motion endorsed by this council and then distributed. But this will work the same. It's just the letter's already gone out, and then we've endorsed it. That's got to kind of be put together at the other end, I believe. But
No, I just was curious because the previous letter was going to the province also, but we were all CC'd on it. It's just curious as to what the difference.
Chair, did you want me to respond?
Yes, please, Regional Council Lee.
Honestly, this was just a letter on behalf of a constituent that I had just looped back through to council for endorsement. I didn't think it was an official, it changed too much from our official stance we had taken a year ago. Again, this is just a letter of support that councillors sometimes send on behalf of constituents. So it was, yeah, to the mayor's point, I probably should have introduced this motion. It was no slight intended. This was just a letter of support that was sent on behalf of a constituent of mine.
Okay. Anything further?
Um,
I assume Councillor Bauer, you want to second this motion?
Yes, Chair, and I'll just add a comment if I can. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee. That motion that we did put forward was last June. And at that time, what I explained, because I did meet with the parents at that time, the same group, and it was the feeling of helping a group of parents who are fighting for their children. And there's no group stronger than a mom and a dad trying to advocate for their child. And I think at that time in June, and I'll repeat it now, how this came about for me signing this letter, is I do have strong feelings about it, is there was a need, we had the ability to act, which was right in the letter, and it was the right thing to do. So I'm glad to have signed the letter with you. And I'm glad to second this endorsement, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Being none, any opposed to endorsing? Bit of a double negative there, but that's okay. That carries. And now item number 4, the Oshawa Poverty Reduction Approach. Councillor Bauer, you pulled that for discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Collier. I just thought this was a timely letter as well. Regional Councillor Dyes and I had submitted our comments to the province for poverty reduction and the Housing First strategy. And then when I saw this letter from Mayor Carter, which really is, also comment about, making comments to the province. And I thought this letter really took it further to the next level or one step further. And, Oshawa, in the letter, it states that it's the highest poverty rate in the region. And clearly the statement that they are looking for and need the help. Oshawa is our neighbor. Our work on the homelessness task force, I have discovered that it is a real partnership between Ajax and Oshawa and all the other regions, municipalities, and Oshawa seems to be the hub or the center that we talk about when we're looking for services or looking for places to refer people to. So I just think I wanted to bring this to attention that we should support this and because if they need help, definitely, and if we help our neighbor, we help.
Councillor Bauer, are you hoping to endorse this?
I think so, Mayor. I wasn't sure, but
You
yes.
make that motion before you speak to it. So
Oh, well, okay. Forget everything I said. I would like to motion this to be endorsed. Now remember everything I said. Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody else wish to speak to this? Being none, can I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Lee. Anybody opposed to endorsing this? From Oshawa, being none, that carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes correspondence. Moving on to departmental reports. Item 7.2, capital account closing report, December 31st, 2009, moved by Councillor Leaks, second by Councillor Khan, that council receive the attached listing of capital account closing as of December 31st, 2019 for information, and that funding transfers to from reserves be approved as follows, and there's a very nice chart. Does anybody wish to speak to this? No, being none. Any opposed to approval? Being none, that carries. Thank you. Moving on to departmental report 7.3, 2020 downtown BIA budget and tax levy. Moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Dyes. The council approved the 2020 downtown BIA annual budget in the amount of $4,980. Any questions, comments, or anybody wish to speak to this? Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to commend the chair and the board members of the Downtown BIA. It was a very different proposed budget originally, and then the pandemic hit us. Lots of worry, concern. So I'd like to commend them for really looking at that and reducing it so drastically to the point that there's a surplus from last year, so there will be no collection of money this year. That's it. Thank you.
Anybody further? I'll just echo your comments, Councillor Bauer. We sort of issued a challenge to the BIAs, and this applies to the Pickering Village BIA on the next departmental report as well, that given these trying times and trying to give some relief to businesses, especially given that about 60% of our small businesses are closed, collecting a BIA levy to support things like events that probably aren't going to happen this year is just sort of adding stress. So I want to thank the BIAs for going and making those changes and helping their fellow business owners as well. So thank you. Anybody opposed to the BIA levy? Being none, that carries. Thank you. Item 7.4, same thing, 2020 BIA levy, this time Pickering Village BIA, moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Crawford. The council approved the 2020 Pickering Village BIA an annual budget in the amount of $30,000 and the amount of $27,915 be raised by taxation. Questions or comments from council? Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm curious as to the difference between the reduction in the two BIAs. One has dropped it drastically and one has only dropped it a little bit. Is there something, you were just saying that events that probably won't happen? Am I missing something?
I will just say the Pickering Village BIA has gone down from, I believe, 50 to 27, so it went down about 40%. They wanted to keep some funds in there for the Christmas in the Village and some promotional, some marketing. And I think that is what a chunk of that is. I don't know if Councillor Tyler Moore and you want to speak to that at all as far as the council rep on the BIA?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, that's exactly right. The Pickering Village Board, we had a spirited meeting about the reduction of the budget. It did drop from 50,000 to 30,000, and the board wanted to have especially the Christmas money available if the province lightens up restrictions so that we can have it. They feel it's a very important part of the town event. It really is, and it would be a shame if they said we can do it and restrictions are lifted and the money wasn't there. So that was the thought behind that. The $10,000 for marketing, it's an action item for sure on that budget list. And the board members felt that they wanted to have the power to help promote the village as much as possible, to help all the businesses come out of this. That was the thought process. Again, that's an action item that the board will have to bring to fruition. So that was the explanation behind those two chunks you see in the budget.
Yeah. Ultimately, council has the authority to change it if we want to. I considered that because I wanted them to probably go a little more strongly on this, Marilyn, but I think that sends a very bad message you know, why have a BIA if we're going to overrule their decisions? So that's what they've decided, and they did do a considerable amount of reduction. But again, like the downtown BIA, if the money doesn't get spent, it does get returned.
Mhm.
And I think that is probably spread out over a larger number of people, so it's a smaller amount per business.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody, anything further on that? Okay, being none, anybody opposed to the Pickering Village BIA levy? No. Approved. Thank you. Item 7.5, development charge interest policy, moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Dyes. That the report titled Development Charge Interest Policy be received for information. And 2, that the development charge interest policy included in attachment 1 be approved. Any question or comments on the DC interest policy? Being none. Oh, Councillor Bauer, are you voting or you have a question?
I have a question. I have 3 questions, please, Mayor Collier. Thank you. And thank you for the report. Very interesting. So the 3 questions I had were the Bank of Canada bank rate plus 2%. So the interest rate being proposed. Just wanted to know how that was determined. And also, what are other municipalities doing in regards to an interest policy, if they're doing anything? And based on the existing applications at the town, are there any currently that are eligible for this deferral or freeze?
Okay, we'll turn that over to finance.
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Bauer. To answer your first question, how was the interest rate determined? We recommended a rate based on the current state of the economy. We looked at what our interest rates are that we're currently getting in our bank account. We looked at also what the borrowing, what rate we could borrow at from an internal, like if you were to do debt. And we decided, or we're recommending prime plus 2% because we felt that it was reflective of the current state of the economy and given the COVID situation. And if the prime rate, as the economy starts to get better, the prime rate will go up, so that interest rate will actually go up. We also felt that the spirit of the legislation was to support nonprofit and rental housing, and given a lower rate based on the current COVID situation would be appropriate at this time. To your second question, are other municipalities using the same rate? There's a wide range of rates being used by different municipalities. We have as low as 2.5 all the way to prime plus 5%. We did look at the Lakeshore municipalities. The only one at this point that has submitted a report and has an approved rate is Whitby, which is 5%. We did try as much as possible to align within Durham region. The other municipalities have not done their report as yet, but we wanted to get ahead in terms of having a framework set up so that when we do get applications, we're ready to process and implement the interest rate charge. And then to your last question, currently in process, we have the Ballycliff development, and I believe there's also an apartment development on Kingston Road that may be eligible for this type of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Anything further? Okay, being none, anybody opposed to the development charge interest policy? Being none, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And final departmental report, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Khan. Contract award for the salt supply. The council award the contract for salt supply to KNS Windsor Salt Limited in the estimated amount of $1.628 million, inclusive of taxes, for a period of 3 years, and the council authorized staff to renew the contract an additional 2 one-year periods pending an analysis and satisfactory performance review at the anniversary date of the contract. Anybody want to speak to the salt supply? Anybody opposed? That's carried. Thank you. That concludes departmental reports. Regional Council report. Regional Councillor Dyes.
Thank you. There's not a lot really to report at this time. As you know, We haven't had any committee meetings as of yet, but that's going to start this month in June. And just to let people know that Regional Council will be sitting also for July and August. That's about it. Thank you.
And I will just add something very quickly regarding Durham Regional Transit. On June 8th, there will be some further service reductions. Transit has, as I think everybody knows, due to COVID, we've been having the rear door boarding, so to avoid the driver at the front, and we have not been collecting fares. So, but we've seen ridership go down 80%. So it doesn't make sense to keep running empty buses. So we've analyzed that, and we'll be making some further service reductions. I believe June 8th is the day that those are going to come into place. I don't think, given an 80% reduction in ridership, that's going to affect too many people. Any questions on Regional Council reports? Being none, anybody opposed to Regional Council reports? Perfect, those are carried. Thank you. Any business arising from notice of motion? We have two. Councillor Khan.
Is this the okay? Thank you, Mayor Collier, for this seconding this motion. The area addressed is in front of the Spiceland Plaza at Haskell and Harwood Avenue North. This is in proximity to the closest cultural plaza in that area, which represents many of Ward 2 residents. As it currently stands, it is dangerous even for vehicles to navigate in and out of that plaza, which makes it literally a nightmare for pedestrian traffic. Many of Ward 2 residents, North Ajax, are new Canadians, and even more important are seniors, whose preferred method of transportation is by walking. A widening of Harwood Avenue and the full signalization of the intersection is not planned until the 2023 to 2027 timeframe. We cannot simply sit back and wait, hoping that a fatality will not happen. My motion tonight is for transportation staff and the appropriate standing committee evaluate the request for a pedestrian crossing and report back to council by the end of June 2020. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And yeah, this is a very busy area, and it's just after the traffic goes from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes, and just after a pretty sharp bend. And yeah, I have seen a lot of near misses there as well. That intersection right there at Haskell, cars pulling out as well. It is a very busy plaza. So I look forward to that staff report. Anybody else have any questions or comments on this? Okay, those, any opposed? None opposed, that's carried, thank you. The next motion is mine, so I will turn over the chair to Deputy Mayor Dyes. And I'll just read the motion quickly. I will not do all of it. I will touch on the most important ones. And this is to do with request for a minister's zoning order to permit a new long-term care facility in the town of Ajax. And so I'll just start with a couple of the whereases. Whereas the government of Ontario recognizing the urgent need to build 21st century long-term care facilities to ensure appropriate care. Whereas Deputy Premier of Ontario and Minister of Long-Term Care, Christine Elliott, committed in March of 2019 to adding 15,000 long-term care beds into the healthcare system in the next 5 years. Whereas these additional long-term care spaces will ease pressure on hospital infrastructure. Whereas Canadian-owned and operated Schlegel Village has indicated its desire to build a new 192-bed long-term care facility employing 230 people at 1401 Harwood Avenue North, a project that aligns with Ontario's vision of better care for our seniors. Whereas the proposed development will address long waitlist times, whereas the approval of this project will spark vital new investment, including the proposed widening of Harwood North from Woodcock to Taunton Road to accommodate growth in the area, and allow Grandview Children's Center to complete their long-awaited 130,000 square foot headquarters for Durham Region children with special needs. Whereas the planning restrictions are impeding the development vision for these lands as the use is not currently permitted, and whereas consideration could be given to permit the development through the Durham Region MCR process currently underway, but will not be completed until 2022. And whereas the government of Ontario supported similar projects in Clarington, therefore be it resolved that Ajax Council supports Schlegel Village in its effort to build a new long-term care facility at 1401 Harwood Avenue North, and that based on the dire need to build long-term care facilities and overall benefit to the Durham community and healthcare system, Ajax Council requests that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing enact a Minister zoning order to enable this proposal to proceed outside the MCR process, and that this motion be circulated to the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, Steve Clark, Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, Christine Elliott, and Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, and Municipality at the Region of Durham Chair, John Henry. And I'll just speak to it very quickly. This area is on a portion of land where an application has already been made to the Region of Durham through this current municipal comprehensive review to rezone it to residential. It's currently zoned prestige employment. If that conversion request is approved by the region, we will have 0 jobs on this land. Approving this long-term care facility on a portion of these lands will bring us 192 long-term care beds that are badly needed by a very reputable provider that owns and operates 19 other long-term care facilities across the province, but will also bring us 230 jobs on those lands. So yes, it is a conversion application, but it locks in the jobs that we badly need in Ajax, and economic development is a very high priority of this council, and something that I don't want to see lost through the municipal or the application for conversion through the MCR. The other thing is, why doesn't this go through the MCR process? Well, that's going to take another 2 years to approve. With long-term care, once you apply for the allocation of beds from the province, there's a certain timeline needs to be followed to get the shovel in the ground and get that done. And having to wait 2 years for the MCR process to complete doesn't work with that timeline. And third, we just finished talking in Councillor Khan's motion about the need for some for a pedestrian crosswalk and some other work on Harwood. This will, in all likelihood, trigger the widening of Harwood Avenue north of Woodcock, which is badly needed. This is one of our main north-south spines, and I would love to see this move forward. It's currently not in the, I think it's 2027 or it's a few years out anyway, but this would help accelerate that and move that forward as well, and would coincide nicely with the Grandview project, which is immediately next to it. So I ask for council support on this. It's not something that we have, I think, ever done at Ajax Council, and but it does align with the Places to Grow. And one other thing, the Places to Grow Act was amended last May to allow applications that were employment intensive to proceed outside the municipal comprehensive review. So the Places to Grow Act has allowed this, but both the regional official plan and the town of Ajax regional plan have language in them that does not allow it to proceed outside the MCR. So even though the province has already said that, yes, we can do this, both our town and regional say we can't, and those pieces of wording in our 2 official plans can't be changed except through the municipal comprehensive review. So our hands are a bit tied on this at this time. So that's all I'll say to this. Thank you, hopefully, for your support.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Are there any questions? Any comments? Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this motion forward. I think there's no one who can say that we don't have enough long-term care beds, or that we definitely need it. So I just wanted to ask, so if this motion passes, what happens? What is the next step, or how what happens after it's passed?
I'll answer, and if I miss anything, maybe Mr. Romanowski or Ms. Cooper can jump in. Basically, this will now be an approved resolution of council, so it'll be an official town of Ajax position. This letter will be sent to the 3 ministers that are listed, as well as the chair of the Region of Durham. All the players are already fully aware of this. Everybody is already completely up to speed, and quite honestly, the ministry has been reaching out on a couple of occasions to ask where our town resolution is. So they are waiting for this. And I'm looking at that as a good sign. That's my understanding. And then we wait. So I don't know, Mr. Romanowski, Mrs. Cooper, did I miss anything?
I can jump in there, Your Worship. From what we understand in our communications with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, is that once the resolution is forwarded to the ministry, then ministry staff will initiate their process. From what I understand is the ministry has a couple options. They could either just go ahead and do the MZO and put in the performance standards that they see fit. But chances are in a situation like this, that won't happen because there isn't a site plan or anything else that's going to be submitted with the resolution going forward. So in our discussions with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing staff is that the staff will probably reach out to the town planners to understand, and maybe Schlegel villages to understand what their proposal is, what the site plan is going to look like, some of those details, so that they could then properly craft the zoning order if that's the way that they're going. And those would be kind of the steps that we understand at this particular point in time.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Mr. Romanowski. So basically, the town of Ajax will have opportunity to comment on how this will look or what will happen, how the facility will be formed. Is that correct?
That's what we understand, yes.
Okay, thank you. No more questions from me.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the mover of the motion, I suppose. So who is the developer who owns all the land right now?
It's currently owned by Tribute. It's one of their last pieces, and it's the entire property is about a 15-acre parcel that is sat vacant. I don't know that the developer they've applied for the conversion, but I don't know that they had any immediate plans to develop. What I do know is that if this goes through the MCR process and is approved for residential, we're going to probably see a fairly large site plan application for a number of townhomes or something.
Right.
I didn't want to get too much into the details of what we have discussed with the developers, but part of the agreement is that about a 1.5 acre parcel will be carved off and donated to Grandview, because Grandview needs, as you all know, the town of Ajax donated a piece of land that we own to Grandview for this new site, but it's they need a little bit more. So 1.5 acres will be parceled off to Grandview, which will help them complete their works. And this, for the long-term care facility, was, I believe, about a 5.6 acre, and I believe they've signed a memorandum of understanding with the developer. So that would leave approximately 7 acres left that I imagine Tribute would develop at a later date.
Thank you. Through the chair to the, I guess, mover again, because you have the information. Why is there like 2 to 3 years doesn't seem like a very long time to me for the MCR. So if we were to do this way with the MZO, what is our approximate time frame for shovels in the ground? Like if it's going to be 2 to 3 years anyways, then wouldn't we be prudent to just wait and just file this through the MCR?
Well, I'll get Mr. Romanowski to come in after, because I certainly am not a planner. My understanding is, if the minister grants the order, that allows them to go ahead, and I would expect them to probably be in the ground sometime next spring, depending on how quickly the site plan process moves, which means, by the end of 3 years, this could be up and running, versus if it goes to the MCR process and then maybe not, the approval is granted through the MCR process. If the approval is not granted, well, then it can't go there because it requires rezoning in that location. So, but if it is granted in 2 years, then of course you will still have that that site plan process and planning and everything else, which is going to take another year probably. And then you would start 3 years from now and however long the build takes. So I guess we'd be looking somewhere between 2.5 years versus 5 years potentially.
Right.
Ms. Romanowski, can you clarify, please?
Yeah, through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee. Yeah, I think that's a fair estimation of the timeline. Site plan approval for a project, and I mean, if a Schlegel Village type of project's a pretty big site plan, I would imagine, based on the number of beds that they're forecasting. Yeah, about a year to do the site plan approval process. You know, by the time if the ministry passes the MZO and back and forth, go through the site plan approval process, I'd say the mayor's timelines are fairly accurate when it comes to that. Definitely faster than waiting for the MCR process, because another element that you need to factor in with that is I would imagine that there could be appeals, which could delay. And those would all have to go to the tribunal, or maybe the minister gets involved with certain decisions of related to MCR appeals if it got to that level. But I would say those timelines are fairly accurate, yes.
And through the chair, I guess to the acting director of planning, this was zoned for prestige employment, right? And if there's one thing I've known since joining council, it's we don't have too much prestige employment left. So what did planning have in mind? What was the planning vision for this land? How many jobs did planning ultimately anticipate being put here? Because I don't disagree with Mayor Collier. I mean, having a long-term care home, it's gonna be a ton of staff maintaining whatnot, but I also do have to measure that against the potential, not necessarily actualized potential jobs we could be losing. So what did planning have in mind for the total jobs for that land?
Well, if we were to use our, our rate that's in place right now under the policy that's in place, about 37 jobs per net hectare, that would come out to, based on a 6-hectare site, 37, that's about 222 jobs based on that number. If we're dealing with high, like office type uses within an employment area, we could be up to 143 jobs per net hectare, which could generate somewhere close to almost 900 jobs on the site. So it really depends. The PE designation and zone allows for a wide array of uses on these lands. So that's probably the range of jobs you would be looking at based on the uses on there, anywhere between 200 and 900 jobs at the end of the day.
And, lacking a report from your, as the acting director, what do you think we could have yielded in terms of employment? You've pretty in depth with planning, the land quite well. What did you think the number of jobs we could have realistically created on this land?
Well, like I said, it could have been anywhere within that range, because we can't, although we would want to control the types of uses that are going in, ultimately we don't have that much control. We have to look at the uses that are permitted in the zoning bylaw, and based on the PE zoning, you have a range of uses that are permitted in there. And as I said, it'd be between 200 and 900 jobs, 900 being the high kind of office type jobs in like a office type building, the 200 being in the range of, a care facility or retirement home or some other similar type of use of that nature. But it also depends on the market as well, as you would hear from a developer telling you. So those all are factored into the plans for the property, and ultimately the use will determine how many jobs are generated on the site.
Thank you. That's actually quite helpful. So to the mover one last time, and ultimately, do we have any provisions of let's say Schlegel, and don't get me wrong, like I met with Schlegel, you've met with Schlegel. They are a top tier LTC, like they're the premium, right? But what if the deal falls through for any reason? Then are there any protections for the town to rezone back to prestige employment, or is this kind of the risk we end up taking by approving this motion?
Well, again, I'll try and answer, and if I miss anything, maybe staff can fill in the blanks. The reason why I approached these groups and put this together was, you asked the question about how many potential jobs are on the lands, and it's, whether it's 32 jobs per hectare or whatever it is, could be within the range. But I can tell you, if the applicant, that the current landowner, is successful in their request to the MCR right now, the answer of how many jobs are on that land is 0. Okay, so we run the very real risk, and I didn't really want to get too much into the details in this, but that piece of property has no other commercial around it. It's kind of a bit of an orphan piece that's between a school and a bunch of residential. So I don't have a crystal ball, but if I had to guess, I would think, and I've spoken to a lot of planners, I would think that we would have a pretty hard time defending this conversion request. So I'm looking at this from a position of 0. And this is a way that we can check a few boxes. 1, get the Grandview project completed. 2, still make sure we get 230, which is meeting the 32 jobs per net hectare, by the way, because 6 hectares for the entire 15-acre site at 32 is what, 184 hectares, right? Or 184 jobs, sorry.
Jobs.
So we are exceeding what is designated in our official plan. When I did talk to Tribute about this, and we were putting this together, I wanted them to do high density mixed use on the remaining 7 acres. And their business team looked at it and they couldn't make the business plan work. We have other places like northeast corner of Salem and Roslyn, where that medical building was put in many years ago, and there's still, I think, 2 empty floors. So the fact is, we just don't have people coming and building offices, especially not in an area where there's no other business around in a residential neighborhood, right? So I'm looking at it from that perspective, and that's how this sort of came about. What guarantees do we have? I think, and Jeff can correct me on this, but I think through the minister's zoning order, they can put restrictions on. And I think that's something that we can talk about. But what I have talked about, because we currently have 12 applications at the region. Well, we don't, but developers have 12 applications at the region right now for conversions in Ajax. Those are all for mixed use, except for this one. But how do we make sure that what we are sold is what we get? And I am absolutely aware of that. I don't want to be the mayor that allows, us to lose our employment lands when I'm the one that's really pushing for economic development. That doesn't make sense. So we've discussed what procedure or policy can we put in place to make sure that what we see is what we get. And what we've come up with so far is minutes of settlement. And we've used minutes of settlement on a number of other things in Ajax. The one that comes to mind is Ajax Auto Wreckers. But there's been, the Beechridge lands over at the northwest corner of Salem and Roslyn. There's a few other areas. Minutes of settlement is a binding legal court document. And I've spoken to Schlegel about that, and they have indicated that they are willing to enter into minutes of settlement with the town, should we be able to get this to go forward. And that is how I am hoping that we can absolutely make sure that what we see is what we get. But I'll leave it to Mr. Romaneski to confirm, but I think the minister would put those stipulations in the zoning order.
I mean, yes, through the chair to the mayor and regional councilor Lee. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the ministry would contact town staff and have a discussion about the proposal to understand all the details associated with it. But even without consulting the municipality, they definitely could put those restrictions in if they felt like those restrictions needed to be put in place.
Right.
Whether that's defining, you know, a minimum or maximum lot area associated with the particular use, or if it was just, you know, maybe it does do the whole lands, but then it's very restrictive or prescriptive about where this type of building should go and where it should be positioned, and what details should be outlined with it. So we won't really know until we get into the discussions with the ministry about that once a resolution gets there. But if, as those discussions go along, our staff will provide updates as we move through there.
Great. So that addresses all my questions. You know, I'm hesitant to add more residential to Ajax. I think we've all agree we have plenty of residential. We need more businesses, as the mayor's said ad nauseum. But this is one of those rare special cases where, to the mayor's point, we check off a lot of boxes between, you know, an special needs center, long-term care, and utilizing land that may not otherwise be utilized. So I don't want this to be a pattern, and I don't think this will be. And so as a result of checking all these boxes and these provisions we may or may not be able to put in, I'm comfortable that the mayor's done his due diligence and staff is doing their due diligence, and I look forward to supporting this motion. I'll call for a recorded vote as well.
Well, you saved me the trouble because I was going to. So,
Are there any further questions or comments from council? If I may, I just have a couple. So help me out here, Mayor Collier. So if the ministry's waiting, as you said, because you've had that conversation with them, waiting for our response, our application, does that mean that they're going to also confirm that we're going to get some long-term beds out here? Because I know there were 15,000 that they earmarked over a 5-year time period, and that deadline's been extended to June. So how do we know for certain that this retirement facility will get those long-term care beds?
I don't know that we do.
Okay.
And that all forms part of it. The application has been made, and you and I have had a conversation about this, and we agree that we need more affordable long-term care. We need more subsidized long-term care, more regional-owned long-term care. Problem is, we don't have people coming to the table. I mean, I've spoken with plenty of long-term care providers in the last 18 months, and one thing they all but Schlegel have in common is they don't own land and they don't have money, and they want to apply for the beds, and they want the town or the region to donate the land, and then they want to go to the federal government and try and get the funds. And that's why we're not moving forward with the not for profit side. This is the for profit side, but we have a willing developer, we have a willing landowner, we have a willing developer who has the experience and has the money and is currently operating 19 very successful facilities. And as Councillor Lee said, they are the Cadillac in the province. So I would hope that their odds would be better than average, but there is no guarantee whether that allocation is going to be made. I think it's important to have, you know, a willing host as well. And that's where the council resolution comes in. We have a willing landowner, willing developer. The region of Durham, John Henry wrote a letter last May or June, I believe, with Mayor Foster of Clarington in support of their conversion in Clarington. Theirs was a more complex case because theirs was outside of the urban boundary, but was still approved. So the region, or sorry, not the province, I believe, is very serious about providing long-term care beds. And if they have those with the money and the skills to get it done come to the table, I'm pretty confident that they'll get the allocation, but there is no guarantee.
I was hoping that they will have, if they're waiting for this application, that maybe, that's what they're thinking, where they're going with this. And I really hope that that is the case. I know the LIN holds the list, the waiting list, which means they know where the demand is. And, I did some homework, and the demand is in the central area here, Ajax, Pickering, kind of Whitby area, Central East. So we do know we have that support there as well. And I also know that Schlegel has very good reputation. So their continuum care, what they have, where you can go into a private accommodation, to assisted living, to long-term care if the need be, it's there. And that's what funds those private accommodation funds, that those long-term care beds. I did find out, just so you know, that the long-term care, whether in a private or a not-for-profit facility, it's the same amount regardless, that they get funded for those beds. It's just that the region or the municipalities sometimes support, they top it up, and support in the way of so they can maybe have more staffing at a different wage level. So I just want clarification on that, because it's not a given always, but I think we're in a very good position to get it, as you say. And the other thing I just wanted to clarify, with this going through the province and them making the decision, all of the lands then will be residential. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how that would work, because the NU piece has to remain received employment, my understanding. So I believe those are going to be determined through the consultations with the province and our planning department, but I'll ask Ms. Romanowski to clarify.
Thank you.
Councillor Dias, can you just repeat the question again?
Just after we go through this process with the province, does that mean, like the application I know that Tribute had was for rezoning for residential? Does this mean all the land, their property, will become residential?
No, that's not the case. I think, as we were discussing before, the province could be more restrictive. They could say the 2 or 3 hectares is only zoned for that use. I don't think the intention of the request that's being put forward is to zone the whole lands, but that will be a discussion that I'm sure the province will have with the planning department here at the town.
So I guess the other issue too, Mayor Collier, is that Ontario made a great announcement today that they're going to have an independent commission look into the long-term care homes. As you know, they've been an issue through the COVID. So that's a good thing. The timing's right there before, maybe some regulations and rules around that will change. So, that I think that's something that we all knew was coming, and that's a good thing. Okay, so any other comments before I call the motion? So, no? The motion was moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Ash Khan, and there's been a call for recorded vote.
Okay, in favor or opposed, Regional Councillor Lee?
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin?
In favor.
Mayor Collier?
In favor.
Councillor Bauer?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Crawford?
Sorry.
Regional Councillor Crawford?
In favor.
Councillor Khan?
In favor.
And Deputy Mayor Dies.
In favor.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mayor Collier, it's all yours.
Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for your trust and support on this one. Moving on to bylaws, we have 2 bylaws, moved by Councillor Tyler Morin, second by Councillor Khan. The bylaws number 16-2020 and 17-2020. We read a first, second, third time it passed, and those are both to do with our public open house that we held earlier. Any questions or comments on the bylaws? Anybody opposed to the bylaws? Those are carried. Thank you. Is there any notice of motion? Being none, New business, notices, and announcements. We had Regional Councillor Crawford, then Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to announce that we have our first business town hall meeting coming up on Monday, May the 25th, from 3 to 4 for businesses to speak directly to Minister Rod Phillips. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm very excited and thankful that our Minister of Finance has been able to set an hour of time aside for our Ajax businesses to come and actually talk with him.
Awesome. Councillor Khan.
Yes. In your correspondence, you would see that Ajax has proclaimed May 26th Guyana Day, and I just want to speak a little bit on that. So Guyana, formerly British Guyana, achieved independence from the United Kingdom May 26, 1966. This heritage means that Guyana is the only South American nation in which English is the official language. We celebrate 54 years of independence next Tuesday, 1 week from today. Native Amerindian, African, Chinese, Indian, Portuguese, and European is the mosaic that populates a land of 6 races who celebrates its diversity and each other's religious beliefs as their own. With its most recent discovery of oil, Guyana has the potential to be the world's richest country in 2025. Through my extensive travels to the Middle East, Asia, Europe, the Caribbean, and North and South America, I found the only other place that embraces the diversity, hospitality, and compassion of that gem we call Guyana is our own Ajax. Thanks to the Guyana Consulate in Toronto and our own Rachel Matheson for taking all the steps in making this possible. And finally, on behalf of all Guyanese and its diaspora, I thank the mayor, council, and staff of the town of Ajax for proclaiming May 26, 2020 as Guyana Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. We had Councillor Tyler Morin and Councillor.
Yeah, if I may, Councillor Bauer, you can speak.
Somebody's got the TV on in the background. Your microphone, please. There you go.
Mayor Collier, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak first before Councillor Tyler Moran. I think my hand might have been up first. If you don't mind.
Are you okay with that, Rob? I saw you first.
Yeah, he
go
tagged
ahead.
me, actually. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to comment. Last Thursday, there was a meeting that Mayor Collier and Lisa Hausch, the manager of Economic Development and Tourism, attended with the members of the Downtown BIA. The chair facilitated the meeting. There were many businesses that attended, business owners and tenants. And it was a great opportunity for the business owners to express their concerns. It was fantastic that the mayor was there to listen to them and answer some questions. And it was very clear the manager of ECD has a relationship with these business owners. So I was really happy to see that happen. And, you know, a couple of things came up from everybody who attended that call. And that is, they're very concerned, number one, about reopening because they have been shut down. There's 66 businesses in the downtown BA. I'm sure there's more in the village. So they're really concerned about what it's going to look like when they reopen. And they're also very concerned about their safety and sort of what the province is mandating for what the requirements will be to reopen. And as well as commenting about the difficulty perhaps for some of them to be eligible for the federal funding. So I've been thinking about that a lot, especially since we had the review of the budget. So I'm just wondering if, I don't know if this needs to be a motion or not, but could there be a train the owner for the BIA members, maybe ECD, or I don't know how it would work, where there could be training on what the province, what the requirements are for reopening and especially for the safety measures. So Rob was at that meeting too. I don't know if you want to speak to that or have comments on it as well.
I do. Yes, I was at your meeting, and thank you for having me. As the province starts to relax its emergency declaration, invariably small businesses, they turn to us. They turn to the 7 of us that are on the ground We're going to those businesses, we're frequenting them as customers, as friends, and they ask us questions. And if you look at any restaurant that's closed, that's 30 people out of work. Each single restaurant, when you drive down the street, it's 30 people on average. The Keg would have more, a Subway sub would have less. Some of them are starting to open again, but they're going to need our support. They're going to need support, I should say, more than ever when they open. It seems like when they're closed, they need one thing. They need help from maybe the federal government. But when they open, and I think it would be prudent for us at the municipality to have some answers, to have some options, to share with them. PPEs, when, that's going to be huge when a restaurant opens. And can we help in that kind of direction? So I support this. I think it's a great way to maybe start using this via the BIAs and then grow from there. And it's true that economic development has relationships with a lot of the businesses already. And I think we have to get people to buy in so that it's done properly. We can have as many businesses as possible succeed. So I definitely support this.
Okay. So I see what you guys did. You aligned before and arranged this. I get it.
I did want
Anybody
to commend you though for listening to their concerns at the meeting. You did a great job.
Mayor Collier, if I could just add the Ajax Advantage, they need help on that. They need grant applications, PPEs, things like those. Those are things that we want to share with them. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about at that, and Lisa Hausch, our manager of economic development, took a lot of notes, a lot of takeaways from that, is the PPE and getting it is like finding it is one thing and affording it is another challenge and a lot of these businesses are sole proprietors. There's some limitations. We heard from some of the people that couldn't qualify for any of the federal opportunities because they hadn't been in business for a year.
That's right.
Things like that. Or maybe their salary threshold, because they were in their infancy, their first year or two in business, they didn't meet the salary threshold because they're not paying themselves yet, right? Yet they still have. So one of the things we talked about was seeing what we could do as a town, as far as seeing if we could put together an inventory of these products that businesses are going to need once they start to reopen. And I think that would be a good investment in our town and our safety for our residents and our business for us to be able to do something that we're looking at. Of course, there's a cost to it and it's unbudgeted, and our budgets are pretty much shot anyway at this point, but we are looking at what we can do to help these businesses when they do open, to hopefully, there's some that won't be able to come back, unfortunately, but we're going to do what we can to help those that can. I had a couple, but before I do mine, did anybody else, Regional Councilor Crawford, you had another announcement? You're not going to announce.
I just wanted to talk about what Lisa had said. If that's okay? Yeah. No, I just think that most of us ran on a campaign of building the whole economic developments and developing and job creation, all that stuff. Obviously, that is kind of not going to happen probably in the next couple of years, not the way we anticipated. And I think that our focus does have to shift to support and to get our businesses ready and up and ready to get as successful as they can possibly be coming out of this horrible situation. And I think the idea of train the business is a great idea. And I think it's I don't know, is it a suggestion that staff put it together? How does that through you, Mayor Collier, how does that actually happen?
Right now, we've talked about this all the way through. We're making things up as we go along. So this meeting was just
Thursday.
So we're staff are looking into it, and we're going to follow up. I mean, I think we still have a couple of weeks lead time on some of these, but it's something in progress. That's all I can say right now. We don't know what it looks like. I just wanted to.
So Mayor Collier, so can I put forward the request that the town does put together? It is one thing to invest in the PPE that the businesses will need, and it's another thing to offer sessions to train them. So which probably, I'm guessing, may not cost what purchasing would be. So can I request that the town put together a training program inviting the BIA members to come, and whether it's an information session or definitely a training on, this is the phase in, this is what's expected, this is what you're mandated to do, and the town here, we're laying it out for you. That's what I would like to see when I say train the owners.
Economic development is not part of this meeting, but the manager of, or the director of planning is. So Mr. Romanowski, I hopefully is writing that down, and we'll take that back to Lisa Hausch tomorrow and have that discussion.
I'm taking notes.
There you go.
So
that
how will that be followed up? How will that be followed up?
Well, I imagine I'll be following up with Lisa, and I'll let council know.
Thank you.
I just wanted to announce, was there any further announcements? No? Okay. I just want to announce the Cyber Exchange event that's coming up next Thursday and Friday, not in 2 days, but in 9 and 10 days. It's a 2-day event on healthcare, and it's in coordination with Amazon Web Services. And there's more information available. We've been promoting it on our social media. It starts next Thursday at 10 a.m. Please go on our website and get some more information. And I just want to wrap up, if there's no further announcements, just on a bit of a public service message. The province has been, we've all worked very hard, and we're seeing the results, even though today was a blip. Somebody needs to mute their mic again. Somebody's got the TV on. Thank you. The province has been opening things up, and one of the things we've been really stressing, and I've been telling everybody, is yes, we want to do this, but we need to do it slowly. I have to say I'm concerned with the large amount of things that, especially the list that came out today. I don't want to see us go backwards. And what I witnessed over the weekend with a lot of gatherings and things that I observed, I just want to caution people, this is not over. Just because we're making some progress, we can very easily go backwards and have to do this all over again. So I just want to caution our residents that to keep doing what we're doing. It's working. If we stop and we just, go back, we're going to be doing this all over again. If we want to get through this, please continue your social distancing, continue your hand washing, continue precautions. We need to do this very, very slowly. And that's my closing message for tonight. Moving on to confirming bylaw. We have moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Crawford, the bylaw number 18-2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ajax at its electronic meeting held on May 19, 2020, be read a first, second, third time and passed. Any opposed? None, that's carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Khan, that the May 19th, 2020 meeting of the Council of the Town of Ajax be adjourned. Anybody opposed? No? Very good. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.